I almost cut the intro short. That's how excited I am for this particular debate. This debate's got everything because this is a topic that I happen to kind of like a little bit because I've actually kind of involved myself in this topic. I've had this discussion with direct people that actually talk about these things in the young creationist community, like Dr. Humphreys and a few of the people. So this is a subject that's kind of dear to my heart because, I like the philosophy, I like the science, and I got two people that want to discuss it. So, hey, what can go wrong there? Joining me tonight, I've got younger creationist Christopher Salvis. Silvis, I'm sorry, Christopher Silvis. If you guys remember him, he's been around for quite some time. He comes in and out occasionally when he's got something he wants to talk about. And today I got Snake is Right, who I actually debated, I don't know, a couple years ago, actually, it's been, who wants to refute him and tell him how wrong he is on this particular topic. Right, Snake? Oh, are you muted?
That's right.
There we go.
Yeah.
Awesome.
For a second.
Yeah, make sure everybody can hear. I make sure that they can hear us and everything like that. If the sound quality okay, not cutting out, things of that nature. I kind of set up the audio earlier and it would look good. So if it's not, then I don't know what's wrong. But all right, Chris, are you praying? Do you need Jesus' help for this? Are you good?
I do need Jesus' help for this, okay. Yes, but no, I'm not praying.
All right, so this is how I want to kind of have it structured. I want kind of a Chris to kind of give us a brief overview of the heat problem, what he thinks it is, and then kind of like dive into it, Snake, and why you have a rebuttal for it, or why you think that it's either a significant problem or why his reasoning is flawed. I have to ask before we get started, though, and I asked Chris before we started, you weren't here, Snake, how he's approaching this, because I want to make sure that we're on topic. The heat problem has two folds. There's one heat problem dealing with radioactivity, and there's one heat problem dealing with the flood. And I want to know which one you're going to be dealing with the most, Chris.
The flood. Okay, so radioactivity is where we're looking, but I'm using the flood to basically explain why we see radioactivity.
Oh, this should be fun. You got that, Snake? You ready for this?
Yeah, I think so.
You taking notes?
Yep.
All right, let's do it. All right, floor's all yours, Chris. Talk to us about the heat problem.
All right, so the heat problem is there's assumptions that go into radioactive decay, and the major assumption is that the decay rate has always been the same, from uranium decaying into lead, rubidium to strontium, potassium to argon, etc. All these different techniques you can use. And what we're suggesting, and like a global flood model, or you could look to catastrophic plate tectonics or the hydroplate theory, whatever creationist flood model that you take, you have to use that to be able to explain why there is so much decay. Why is there 3.5 billion years worth of decay in the Precambrian granite globally? Why is there little radioactivity up here, which only yields millions of years? And this is a general observation. You can see that the Earth is billions of years old down here, and it's only millions up here generally. So there's that. And what we're suggesting is that the decay was accelerated. They call it accelerated nuclear decay. But with that, there's a problem, and it's known as the heat problem. If you accelerate all of that decay, it produces an enormous amount of heat, and so much that it'll actually vaporize the crust of the Earth. So that's what we're left with. That's what the heat problem is. We have to use the flood to be able to explain basically how we can transfer that heat away from the Earth so that it doesn't destroy all life, and Noah is able to make it off of the ark.
Chris, Snake, do you accept that as kind of what the heat problem is? And I'll tell you right now, that's close enough for me. But what do you think?
Yeah, close enough. Okay. Plus the friction of the continents and the, but yeah.
A little rain coming down for 40 days, friction of the continents, thermal vents, the whole 9 yards. All right, so I think everybody's on the same page here. All right. Go for it, Chris. Why is the heat problem no longer a problem?
So I'll try to solve the heat problem. if you will.
Yes, please do. I'm sure a lot of creationists are watching or will be watching, taking notes and writing papers on this because, as far as I know, every creationist organization has not solved this problem yet. ICR, Answers in Genesis, Creationist Research, CMI, none of them have solved this problem yet. So if you have a solution, I'm sure that a lot of them will be watching. Oh, where'd you go?
I have to share my screen.
Is that going to work?
I don't know. Hopefully.
I don't think it's going to work because I have the way I have it set through the NDI. I don't think it's going to work. But let me try something. Go. Well, let me see here.
I'll stop sharing and then maybe you could toggle with something.
Yeah. Stop sharing for a second.
Yeah, I did.
Oh. Then why is it I still can't see you? Yeah, you disappeared. Turn your camera back on. There you go. There we go. Yeah, and it's weird with Skype. For some reason, Skype likes to resize things on the NDI, and I don't know why. I don't think you'd be able to share things, Chris. Could you kind of just wing it? We can all get a mental image. Now you're muted. Can you hear him? Snake?
No, you're muted, Chris.
You're muted, Chris. Yeah, that's not on my end. That's on yours. Okay, so why he's figuring out the mute so we don't have dead air. So Snake, real quick. So he's under the impression that so he is correct on the fact that he has to be able to explain millions, if not billions, of years of radioactive energy in a very finite time, in 6,000, 7,000 years, as opposed to millions and billions of years. Now, they have suggested something called accelerated decay. The problem is that accelerated decay is something that is in physics never been demonstrated. It is something that Humphreys himself has only said must exist because reasons. He literally told me this. He said the evidence for accelerated decay is that because it could be no other way. That was I'm not even kidding. That was his argument to me. It wasn't based upon physics. It wasn't based upon science. It was because it has to be because the Earth is 6,000 years old. So when you start with the presupposition that the Earth is only 6,000 years old, that's why he argues that it is the case. I still can't hear you, Chris. And by the way, there must be a lot of latency because all your images are going all over the place. Can we hear you now, Chris?
Yep.
Okay. So, wait, did he freeze now?
I heard him respond, but
Chris,
you can't hear me?
Yeah,
I can share the screen again.
Yeah, I can hear you, but you're frozen for some reason.
And I had to log out of the laptop, so something went crazy. So now I'm on.
All right, turn on your camera real quick.
I don't even know how to turn the camera on.
Uh-oh.
Okay, here we go.
There we go. I see something. All right. Okay, I see you in Skype, but it doesn't update for some reason. Yeah, I'll work on that. So go ahead and continue. So tell us more about the heat problem here and how you've solved it.
All right. There is so if you Google, this is just because it's only research that you're going to get, but it is recent from 2021. You can Google problems for the origin of Earth's radioactivity, and this paper that you're going to pull up, which is from, legitimate as far as I know, I guess what you would call a scientific journal. Now, it says that the conventional wisdom is that radioactive elements were formed from the stars, and then, neutron stars basically exploded, accreted together into planets, and that's how you get the radioactive elements. They came from neutron stars or some kind of star. And then the other view, which is what they're researching, is that these elements could actually be formed from deep within the crust of the Earth, just from the normal convection patterns and earthquake activity or whatnot that goes on deep within the crust of the Earth, and all that overlaying heat and pressure acts on the the rock and actually fuses it and is fusing radioactive elements right now. And they have evidence for this, that it's naturally being produced. And so the conventional wisdom is that the decay rate is, that these elements are decaying and that there's nothing else being introduced. Whereas this model suggests that radioactivity is constantly being produced in the crust of the Earth today, so much that could actually affect life in the future, perhaps.
I just want to make sure I heard you correctly. You said neutron stars?
Well, yeah, some kind of star. That's what they theorize produced the radioactive elements, right?
Just making sure. A neutron star is a very specific type of star. Flamio for $5 says, if you say Earth is 6 billion years old and believe in deep time, would you still be a younger creationist? I think those would be a contradiction. Oh, Flamio, you can't have both. All right, Snake. What do you got for a Snake? What's some of the issues he said so far? You think?
I mean, the first ones are kind of more philosophical, but strike me first off. So, like, what comes to mind is, why would God, if he has all this foresight, all this power and knowledge, why would he even contrive this geological evidence in such a way that makes it so difficult for his supporters, the young Earth creationists, to reconcile the evidence with the literal biblical story, and that evidence also somehow misleads all of the best, brightest scientists for hundreds of years, and increasingly so. The more evidence we have, the more convinced we are, like with the advent of the atomic theory and things like that, the more convinced the scientists are that the age of the Earth is older, and God should be able to know that that was going to happen with the circumstances that have been set up. And so and there seems to be no actual reason to put these, if you're correct, Chris, misleading evidence that he knew would mislead the best and brightest. So that doesn't make sense. And like Steve, you were saying, it seems to be born of this idea that it has to be 6,000 years old. We start with that and we try and make all the evidence fit. And various creationist organizations literally state this as a mission statement of, it doesn't matter what the evidence is, the story of Christ always comes first. And then, of course, there's no evidence for accelerated nuclear decay, just nuclear reactions, bombarding elements with subatomic particles it looks similar, but it's a nuclear reaction. And as for the assumptions made, it's not so much of an assumption in general. The conditions of nuclear decay are known. The conditions of the rocks are various conditions are known. So we know some conditions are going to be ideal for counting the daughter nucleides versus the parent. And some conditions are going to contain some contamination, and we do know what the telltale signs of contamination are, and we test those. And so it's not really just an assumption that whatever we find, it's fine. It's just ideal textbook conditions. And we also have cross confirmation, where different decay species will give us the same date for the same rock range, and even sometimes in the same sample. And that would require a level of contrivance where God would have to custom accelerate different decay species at different rates just to get them to look like they're the same age. And there doesn't, again, my first point, there doesn't appear to be any reason for that. And that would, he would know that would cause confusion in the scientific community, so much so that it is the overwhelming consensus. And I guess the final point is, it does seem like perhaps there's some fusion reactions in the core of the Earth. I'm not sure about the chemistry of that. Maybe Steve could say something.
The two most predominant radioactive materials in the Earth are thorium and uranium. And so they generate a lot of heat. Matter of fact, one of the biggest contributions to heat in the Earth is radiological decay from thorium and uranium deposits. They're ubiquitous, but they're not. I think Chris is conflating a few things about how these radioactive elements are produced. There's the higher elements, yes, they can be produced from emerging neutron stars and white dwarf stars, but the lower elements are done by what's called stellar nuclear synthesis, and that's kind of a confirmed thing. I mean, it's not even kind of, it is confirmed. So I don't know what he's trying to argue at this. As far as like obviously these elements exist. Where they came from, we can show that they came from stars. We can do spectroscopy and see the chemicals in these stars. We know that these stars are being produced. They're producing these elements. So Chris, how does that relate to the elements in the Earth? You think are being created by the Earth rather than from some kind of star that made its way into the Earth and kind of through an accretion disk and congealment formed the planet Earth, right? You think that none of that occurred. You think God created the planet Earth in stasis and said, boom, here's the Earth, and in the Earth I'm having all these radionucleotides, correct?
No, that's not my argument.
Okay, that's not your argument. All right, so
well,
go ahead.
So I tried to make it clear at the beginning. Maybe I didn't go over it very well. God creates the Earth, right? He creates the granite, and then he creates a world that is very different from the world that we have today. And then he destroys it with a global flood, and that's actually what produced the radioactive elements. Whereas when he created it, they wouldn't have existed at all.
Oh, okay. So let me try to wrap my head around this. So before the flood, there was no radiological decay of anything.
No. Not on Earth, anyway.
Not on Earth. Okay, so
what mechanism would cause that to start?
Radioactivity.
Or prevent it from happening in the first place.
Well, because the Earth is stable before the flood, and then it becomes unstable as a result of the flood. It's still unstable today, wobbling and doing all kinds of crazy stuff. There's lava spewing out of the ground.
What does it have to do with the elements themselves? What if I can ask, Chris? What causes a radiological decay? What is the reason why something decays, whether it goes through an alpha decay, beta decay, gamma decay? Why is there certain elements that are stable and certain ones that are not stable? Do you have an answer as far as like the young creationist position?
Yeah, they're either they're high on the level of, or the valley. They call it a valley.
They're high.
Stability.
They're high. These chemicals are high. Okay, these elements are high.
Yeah.
Okay, so there's a valley, I guess. I don't have the graph to show you on the slide. So.
Go ahead.
Okay, the valley of stability. Basically, these elements are too heavy. They're naturally falling apart or fissioning because of the fact that they can't stick together. Their bonds are very light. If you look at uranium, it's actually bound pretty well as compared to the elements that you would find at the top layers of strata, other elements with shorter half-lives. They would actually be bound pretty loosely as compared to the uranium, which is why uranium has a longer half-life. Correct?
Not really. I mean, Snake, you want to try to adjust that one?
Well, so what would be the difference between a more stable isotope of uranium and the radioactive isotope?
Yeah, there's a lot of isotopes of uranium.
Yeah.
Well, I'm kind of talking about different elements, like altogether. Like you have uranium, which is radioactive. Certain isotopes in uranium, they're going to fall apart because they're unstable. Like there's just too much there for the fusion. You have to get the atoms to stick together, in order for them to, take shape. Like you can't. I'm trying to put this into words, because
try. Yeah, you're trying to put them in words. I just don't think that. And Chris, have you taken a physics course to maybe express these things in a more coherent way of
well,
how the
I think that you might be able to do a better job explaining this. The whole point.
Well, yeah, but it's your debate. Sure, I can. I got a background in nuclear technologies. I know. I have an understanding of these topics of what radiological decay is. But,
well, it's kind of the basic, though. What you're asking, that the element is radioactive because it's too heavy. It's falling apart. It can't hold itself together.
I,
unstable.
I don't know what you mean by heavy. I mean, there are heavier isotopes, but stability has
Right.
to do with the fact of the proton-neutron ratio as far as the energy level. So a particle that has to decay means it's trying to go to a lower energy efficient state. That's all really nuclear decay is. It's something going to a more stable
But you can
energy
actually weigh
state.
that energy, though, right?
Well, I mean, are you talking about an energy mass equivalence? I mean, you're not really trying to weigh the energy. You're trying to say, okay, how much energy does this particle have to use to reach more of a ground state, where there's
So I guess
right,
that's
you
what
can't go
I
any
kinda
lower than
mean
ground
by
state, right? So
too
you want.
heavy.
But go ahead, but go back to the topic because Snake asks a great question. He's like, one, why does God have to do it this way? And two, how does the flood do this? Right, Snake? I mean, how does the flood have anything to do with radioactivity?
Yeah, like there must be some kind of nuclear reaction occurring if the flood is somehow taking all these stable elements and making them now radioactive.
Oh, by the way,
Yeah.
can I note something in here for the live chat? For people that are new, I'm not just a moderator. I am actually in the debate itself on this channel. I told people that are new to this channel, I don't run it like modern day debate. I'm actually involved in these discussions just as much as the people that I have on. It's always been that way in this channel. Where it was supposed to be until we had a dishonest co-host or two. Yeah, so people out there, yeah, if the moderation is more than moderation, I'm actually involved as well. And I let them know at the beginning of this that when it comes to the physics, I'll be interjecting. But go ahead, Chris.
A model to basically produce the radioactivity is the crust of the Earth itself, with most of the water that we see today on the surface being under the crust and being forcefully released at the time of the flood, basically causes the whole crust to flap like a flag in the wind, because the crust is connected by pillars to the mantle in thousands of locations. They basically all become lightning rods, and the entire crust becomes like a circuit board. And so huge voltages of electricity pass through it, and that's what's producing these elements. It's what produced it in the past. It's why we have them today.
So I mean,
I don't
that
know
would,
how much of that gone over your head or you actually absorbed any of it at all, but that's just the simplest way that I can put it. And if I
and it
had
would
the slides, I guess I could give you images and you'd be able to grasp it a lot better. But
it would
Doubt
take
that.
the amount of pressure and heat like contained within stars much larger than our own,
yeah,
which would
they
probably
actually estimate
obliterate
that a
the
light
Earth.
bulb can get hotter than the surface of the sun. So
Yeah.
when you're talking about like huge voltages of electricity, Z pinches, these have been produced. There's nuclear fusion reactors. They don't have successful nuclear fusion reactions, but they produce phases like minuscule amounts of what are called super heavy elements.
Did you say Z
And
pinch?
they rapidly decay into lighter but still heavy elements like uranium.
Z pinch.
But it's not just
okay.
heat; it's pressure. Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I want to make sure he's talking. You're talking about Z pinch, right? You said Z
Yeah.
pinch. Okay. Okay, go ahead. I'm just making sure.
In these laboratories, what they do is, like, if you look at a lightning strike, that's a channel of plasma, super hot gas. Now, if you can get a magnetic field to compress all of those channels, you get a Z pinch, okay? And it's basically like they use high-powered lasers to implode a target that has a specific element that they want to fuse together or whatever. They just add a bunch of neutrons or protons to it, and it becomes super heavy, but it does not last. It's very short-lived, so like the blink of an eye, it's just there and it's gone. So high technology is required to even capture these fusions of the elements. I mean, are you familiar with any of the fusion experiments, Steve?
Yeah, I know what Z pinch is. It's a way to produce very high temperatures by having plasma in a containment field, because of the magnetic. Because you're dealing with highly charged particles at very high temperatures, they have a tendency to go through the containment. So you have to be able to restrict them. And there's a couple different ways: Z pinch or by lasers, which is a nova reactor or a tokamak fusion reactor. But I'm still not understand how that has anything to do with how the flood created radioactivity. Snake, is that explaining to you anything about how the flood affects radioactivity? Because he's explaining how a fusion reactor works in theory, but that has nothing to do with the flood.
Yeah, and I'm still wondering why go through this complicated, contrived process when God could just poof the Earth into more or less its current state, instead of just, why would he poof the lightning into the crust of the Earth to create radioactivity? And
Snake, that's the wrong way to look at it. He's not poofing anything. He's not doing that. It's a naturalistic process, the global flood. The Earth is a supernatural creation, but the flood was natural. It was catastrophic, it was something negative, something that God didn't want to happen. It had to happen, though. He actually set up the Earth to be a ticking time bomb so that it would eventually go off. And that catastrophic event produced elements that have, I guess, like Steve was saying, they have too much energy. I would say they're too heavy. They're unstable. It's a negative reaction on the elements themselves. That's what the global flood did. So if I could explain this like using my hand, here's the crust of the Earth, okay? It goes up and down. As this happens, it smashes down onto these pillars that are connecting it to the mantle. This charges those pillars, okay, turns them into lightning rods, okay, because granite bedrock has the element quartz. And quartz, when you compress it, actually produces a charge. So if this is happening on a global scale, theoretically, you could get enough energy to surge huge voltages of electricity through the crust and generate super heavy elements that would then rapidly decay into the naturally radioactive elements that we see today.
So, first of all, that's just adding more heat to the problem. And second of all, I just don't know why do this at all when God knows that this is going to look like it's much older than it is.
Well,
and it doesn't have to do with the accelerated decay either, right?
Adam is a full-grown man, right? He creates Adam, and any biologist would say that he's 30 years old, but why would God create him that way? Well, because it's God. He's creating things that are beyond our imagination, so that we can strive to know him better and serve him. It's like God is God of knowledge.
There's no controversy about the age of Adam, and we're not using Adam to determine the age of the Earth. And the Earth is not a thinking thing, so it doesn't need to be an adult.
Somebody wants.
Well, you're asking the question, why would he even do it? But
Chris, somebody wants to know what Alden's number is, which I know the reference for Alden's number, and I know why they're asking the specific question of you. And I don't like sharpshooting. I don't like kind of gotcha stuff. But have you heard of what's called Alden's number?
I'm not sure what you're saying.
Alden's.
The A word?
Yeah,
Almonds?
No, Alden's. ALDEN's number.
I don't know what that is. No.
It's an expression that people have used when they try to say a person is talking about a topic that they're not actually knowledgeable about. But here's the thing: you're not claiming to be a physicist. You're not claiming to have a background in science. You are a young creationist. You're trying to formulate these types of opinions based upon a preconceived belief that the Earth is 6,000 years old, rather than come to the conclusion of the Earth being old as far as the evidence. Right? You've already started with your presupposition. You've already started that the Earth is somehow, as you said, supernatural. Your words were the Earth is supernatural, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah. Right there, you're already starting with a huge presupposition outside the realm of science. You've done what's called, ever heard of, you know who Robert Gentry is, right? And polonium halos. Yeah, you did what Gentry's has done. When Gentry's was confronted with this polonium halo evidence, the evidence that his work was incorrect, he basically defaulted to, God made special exceptions. God made what's called singularities. Singularity would, in his vernacular, was a one-time event that God said, "Hey, I'm doing this," right? So he tried to have this ad hoc explanation of why the actual evidence we're looking at didn't conform with his model. And so he had this ad hoc explanation, well, God did it this way as, blah, 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 which is Again, not scientific. And it kind of sounds like you're kind of doing the same thing here.
Well, I'm not really bringing up ad hoc. Like, I'm not saying that anything was miraculous. I'm saying that the Earth was obviously miraculous.
Not obviously. Snake, is the Earth miraculous?
I would say no.
I mean, it's wonderful. I mean, the Earth is pretty remarkable, but I wouldn't put it in the miracle category.
In no way, I'm trying to make it clear that I'm not saying radioactive elements are supernatural. In no way were they formed supernaturally. This was a total naturalistic process you can explain scientifically.
Okay.
Well, I'm having a hard time understanding the science, and it's still, we're stuck at why there's radioactivity at all, right? We haven't even gotten to accelerated nuclear decay.
Yeah.
Or how that stopped.
Why don't we chase that rabbit then? Why do you wear that hat? You know, it's like you're kind of asking the same question. Why does radioactivity? You know, why does it even exist? Well, why even ask the question? You know,
well,
maybe God wants us to figure something out.
If this hat made people think that I was, I don't know, a serial killer or something, and I knew that, and I kept wearing it, and I wanted them to stop thinking that, but I kept wearing it anyway, even though I had the power to take it off and make them think what I wanted them to think, then I would do that.
It's what you're saying is like God fooled us, basically. He was like a charlatan and made things appear to be billions of years old so that everybody would end up believing it and going to hell. That's not what's happening. What's happening?
No, I'm asking why. Well, I'm saying that doesn't make sense because your God wouldn't try and trick us, and yet it does appear that the Earth is billions of years old, according to the vast majority of everyone who's educated
even to creationists,
on the subject.
Even to creationists. Chris, I do know the big players in the creationist community, obviously. And so they have actually said that, yes, the Earth does have the appearance of looking old, but they go on to try to explain that. But they do, most of them will acknowledge that there is the appearance of it being old, but then they add the ad hoc explanations.
Yeah, I agree. It appears to be old. It appears to be 3.5 billion years old. The universe appears to be, you know, some.
The Earth is, I don't know, well, the Earth is more about 4.54 billion. The universe is around 13.8, 13.9 billion.
So I would agree that that way it does appear to be so. The stars appear to be billions of light years away, and the light takes, you know, many millions of years to reach the Earth.
So I'm not just asking, like, well, why did God choose blue for the color of the sky? Like, there are inherent problems with why he would choose to make the Earth look so much older if he wants us to think that it wasn't older.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Well, maybe he gave us enough information already that we wouldn't jump to that conclusion when we saw it. We would actually investigate it further if we wanted to know the truth of something as complicated as that. Like, you could say that the sun is rotating around the Earth just based on the way that it looks, but if you investigate it, you'll see that that's not the case. And so you'd ask, why would God, you know, make it appear that everything's spinning around us when the truth is that the Earth is spinning? It's just an optical illusion, really. It's
but the
not
best
like
investigators have come to the opposite conclusion.
Wait, did you just say the Earth spinning is an optical illusion? Chris?
Well, yeah, because it looks as if, you know, the bodies of the solar system are moving around us in the universe. It looks like space is moving when Earth itself.
Well, that's not an optical illusion. That's just our frame of reference.
I guess.
Yeah. Okay.
I guess I could use that vocab.
Yeah, I wouldn't call it an optical illusion. It's just a frame of reference. I'm still confused here, and I think Snake is in the same boat that I am. We're both still trying to figure out, how does this flood have anything to do with radioactivity whatsoever?
I don't think that I could describe it any better than I already have. Basically, earthquake electricity is what's happening at the time of the flood. That electricity that's surging through the crust of the Earth because of the massive movement.
But that doesn't create radioactivity. Radioactivity is created in complex, complicated processes, chemical processes, where you have like a proton-proton cycle, or you have what's
Well,
called
that's
a triple alpha process.
That's why I brought up that article that I want people to obviously look at, because it actually is scientific evidence that radioactive elements can be produced from the Earth, not just stars. Maybe it's still possible to get them from stars, and
Well, I mean, they're produced through decay chains. I mean, do you know what a decay chain is?
Yeah.
Okay. What would be a decay chain? Because in a decay chain, you have an element that has other elements in it that are going to be radioactive until you get a stable isotope. So this is like lead, right? Usually lead is one of the more stable ones. But if you start off with like uranium-235, it's a long process to get to that final stage. And in the intermediate steps, you have these elements that are going to be radioactive. Some of them for millions of years, some of them for a couple days. That's why we see elements in the Earth, because we have the long period decay elements that were created in the stars, and then they form the Earth, and now they're decaying. So we see all the elements in the decay chain because of the time periods. I mean, I don't know why that's controversial.
Well, it could be that that's the case, that they slowly sat here and decayed for billions of years, or those elements were generated recently. So this level of decay, you see more of the decay down in the granite. Up in the sedimentary strata, you see kind of less of it. So that would suggest basically the Earth has been here decaying for billions of years. But you can accelerate that decay if you produce a super heavy element, because in the decay chain of a super heavy element, it follows fusing, into, as it tries to reach stability, like you were saying, it's going to eventually fission, decay into a naturally occurring radioactive element, like we see today.
Fission and decay are not quite this. I mean, a fission is a very specific thing, but when we're talking about decay, we're talking about alpha and beta decay. Do you know the difference?
Sort of alpha, beta. I mean, it's apples and oranges, right?
Well, I mean, okay. Look, Chris, if you're going to be talking about radiological decay and you're going to try to promote the idea that accelerated decay somehow solves the heat problem, and you don't know the difference between alpha and beta decay, can I just recommend you maybe look into a little bit further? Because, I mean, alpha and beta decay are pretty standard types of decay modes.
I'm not saying that I don't know what it is. I'm just saying that there's no point in getting technical. And
that's not technical. I don't think you know the difference. What's different
subatomic particles?
Okay, what's ejected? What's ejected in a beta decay?
Some kind of proton or neutron. I don't know exactly what is emitted.
All right. Anyways, we'll move on. I don't like sharpshooting. It's just I'm trying to get the point out that maybe you might want to look into a little bit more. If you don't know what the decay process is, you don't know what a beta decay process is. It's like Snake pointed out. It's kind of first day stuff. But anyways,
yeah.
Go ahead, continue, because I'm a Snake. I feel bad for Snake because I'm not comprehending this, and I'm pretty sure Snake's in the same boat as me. So I don't think he has anything to argue against.
Sounds like so far we've got fusion creating super heavy elements in the core of the Earth, then somehow getting that to the crust, and then subterranean lightning creating fission that looks like decayed elements that have been decaying for millions of years.
Yeah. That's essentially what I'm saying. I don't know. Now the evidence for that is it's a whole nother topic. So like, I guess Steve was saying before we started this, we was talking, and you said that accelerated nuclear decay, that there's no evidence for it, but
correct.
There's substantial evidence for accelerated nuclear decay.
Okay, what is it?
Helium retention and zircons, for one.
Oh God, Chris, it's not even wrong.
All right, I'm just going to give you the benefit of the doubt and say that one's going in the trash. Okay.
Yeah, cool. Okay, first of all, as you may know, I was intricately involved in that discussion with zircon decay. Matter of fact, I mentioned in Dr. Henke's paper that he wrote for Talk Origin that I mentioned many times in that paper that he didn't get it published, but it's on his actual personal website, because I had facilitated the conversations for a very long time on the specific talk on the Fenton zircons between Dr. Humphreys, Dr. Lachelle, and Dr. Henke. So this is a topic that I'm pretty familiar with as far as that. That has nothing to do with accelerated decay. That has to do with alpha particles being diffused through different concentration levels of a zircon, which they made huge mistakes on as far as the geometry, as far as the distribution of it, as far as the Humphreys actually messed up on the math, okay? But the Fenton zircons had absolutely nothing to do with accelerated decay as far as a creation standpoint. That's a completely different argument.
Well, there's another argument that says the amount of helium that is currently in the atmosphere that has been produced by the decay of uranium to lead, basically, or uranium to thorium, one of the two, that helium that's in the atmosphere, there's only 300 million years worth of helium that's been produced by radioactive decay, when there should be, obviously more if it's billions of years old.
Yeah. It's quite a lot more than 6,000 years, though.
Yeah, you could say that.
Yeah, so I mean, don't you think though, Chris, that look, if you take a range of something, right? You take a probability of, okay, how old is the Earth, right? It has to be something in this range, and then you try to get the range smaller and smaller, right? So you try to get the limit of where it can be. You would agree that the age of the Earth is older than yesterday, right? You don't follow the Omphalos hypothesis, last Thursdayism or last Wednesdayism. You agree that the Earth is older than a day, correct?
Yeah, I would say most of the scientific evidence puts it around 10,000 years old.
None of the scientific evidence does that. But you just answer my question, though. You agree it's older than a day, right?
Yeah.
And you agree it's older than a month and a year. So there's a range, and you can start getting closer and closer in that range. So you agree it's not 13 billion years. You agree it's not one day. So then you start kind of narrowing it down to this parameter. All of science puts it in a very specific range of the age of the Earth, around 4.5 billion years old. All of it does. And you keep on trying to put out these things that are trying to make it outside that range that don't fit the actual science that we're seeing. And any kind of anomaly doesn't actually disprove anything. An anomaly just means that we haven't understood the process well enough to understand why it's something that is outside of that parameter. But by limiting that range, as Snake pointed out, even if the minimum is 300,000 years, your hypothesis that it's 10,000 is already falsified. Matter of fact, with the supernova 1987A, the lowest end, that lowest range possible with physics, is around 160 something thousand years old. What was the? Do you remember Snake for supernova 1987? What was it? 167,000 years, I believe it was. That was the actual minimum that the Earth can be old, or the universe itself. It cannot be any younger than that, because that's again trying to get your range down. Have you ever heard of that before, Chris? Again, I don't know the exact number. I think it's 167,000 years, if I'm not mistaken, something around that time period. I'm giving a rough estimate here, but if somebody in the live chat knows, they can look it up. But 1987 Alpha, the supernova, put that range, the very at the very minimum, the Earth or the universe has to be around 170,000 years old. Period. There's no way around that.
I'm not with that one. I'd have to look at that. I don't know what you're even talking about. So
I think it's 168,000 or something like that. But Snake, are you familiar with what I'm talking about?
Yeah, I've heard that before, but I'm not sure what the number is.
Okay, I think it's around 167, 168,000. But anyways, I mean, do you understand that concept, Chris, of trying to get the range of saying, okay, this is one standard deviation over, this is two standard deviations over. You're so far outside of the range of every discipline of science that there's just absolutely nothing that supports it.
No, I don't think that I am out of the range, actually.
Halando says 168,000. Thank you, Halando.
But let me get back to the evidence on accelerated nuclear for Snake here. Mm-hmm. So, Snake was right. Snake was wrong, but let's just give him the benefit of the doubt, say that he was right, and let's assume that helium retention, that the amount of helium in the atmosphere, that those are garbage, can't be trusted. Let's look at carbon-14 and dinosaur bones and coal seams. It can't last for more than like 160,000 years. So what is it being found in there at significant levels? Let's just assume Snake was right again, and we'll throw those carbon-14 dates in the trash. Now, you can look at I gotta bring this back up. So what do you think about those, Snakes? So if all of those are wrong, trying to figure out a way to word this, because I was going somewhere with that and then I lost my train of thought.
That's okay. You'll probably get it again soon.
Yeah, I really wish I could have used my slides and I could just I would have been able to blast through this with like a 15-minute opener. But
go take your time. Go ahead, Snake. I mean, I don't know where to go with that, so that's all yours, man.
I mean, I'm not sure what you're referring to with carbon-14 and dinosaur bones, because that's not how we date them.
Correct.
And then I didn't quite get the coal slump. What was that?
Well, carbon-14 found in coal seams, found in dinosaur bones, and found in diamonds. So there's no way it could be some kind of a contamination. I was thinking of various examples to show accelerated nuclear decay. Those are like some of them. But most of the Earth's heat is actually being generated from radioactivity that's occurring deep within the crust. Uranium is producing at least half of the Earth's heat, at least, and it's continuing to grow. So even if you can throw all those away, you still have the general observation that there is an appreciable amount of radioactive decay that is centered towards the center of the Earth. And then that basically gets smaller the higher that you go up in the strata. Now, does that mean that billions of years have passed, that those layers took millions of years to build up? Or could it mean that it's basically a pure coincidence? So the reason that there's not a lot of decay up here is because they're farther away from the energy source, which is deeper within the crust. That's what's actually causing surges of electricity to move up through the crust and slowly fuse different elements. Half of the Earth's heat, so that's a significant amount of heat that's being produced by this.
So that wouldn't, if what you're saying is happening, that wouldn't even be accelerated nuclear decay. That would just be a nuclear reaction in the Earth.
Yeah, a natural nuclear reaction, which you could use that to explain how it could form radioactive elements. It's from face value. You look at the geologic column, and you can actually go to the Precambrian strata and date the uranium. It's going to come up 3.5 billion.
Yeah.
You can date the elements in the top.
Yeah, I mean, we could grant all of that, but we would still be butting up against the heat problem, which is the whole thing. Is even if you had some mechanism to create that nuclear reaction and make it progressively look younger as the layers go up, it would still be releasing the same amount of heat from that reaction, and we would still have a molten Earth.
Yeah.
Well, now here are some mechanisms then for heat transfer. If we want to try to solve the heat problem, I've already kind of tried to explain, I don't know if I did a very good job, but basically how you can produce the radioactive elements. Now let's talk about how you can remove the heat that's being produced from this. So if the global flood produces radioactive elements and that process is accelerating all of that decay, well, where's all the heat going? And the first answer and the primary mechanism of heat transfer is cold packing fusion. So when elements fission, they release heat. When they fuse, they absorb heat.
I took thermodynamics, and I have no idea what the hell you're talking about.
So are you proposing cold fusion now?
Real quick, April Ryan says for $9 Canadian. I have secondhand embarrassment. Sorry, April. I'm sorry. Don't be embarrassed. It's okay, man. We're this is a safe zone, man. This is a safe spot. I don't know what the hell that was, Chris. Can you kind of go over that again? Because I know the mechanisms, but for heat transfer, that's not one of them that I'm familiar with.
Well, you know, Snake, you know that elements, like when they fission uranium, it releases heat, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, the opposite is true for fusion. There's an absorption of heat when elements together.
Wait, what?
No, that's what there's a. Are you familiar with the problem of cold fusion?
What is that?
Well, it's a hypothetical. It's more of a goal. The fusion releases energy, and it can be used to, similar to fission reactions, but it's too hot, so they want to be able to create cold fusion so that it's
okay. In a nutshell, okay, I gotta remember the whole thing with the cold fusion. It was actually, it ended up being a chemical exothermic reaction. Okay, but generally speaking, Chris, in order to have a fusion reaction, you need to do it at higher temperatures. Okay, and so you need to put in energy into the system, and when you put energy in the system, it causes a fusion. There's something called a May-West curve, which is considered to be politically poor, I guess, nowadays. But when I learned this type of topic, it's called the May-West curve, and it's a fission or fusion yield curve, and it basically shows where an element is on the scale of stability, such that how much energy you need to put into the system is comprised to what you get out. And so, if you're on this side on the May-West curve, that if you have to put in energy to get something out, it has to be fused. It has to be fused together. So you put in all this energy, you get to overcome the electrostatic repulsions. You have these, and I'm explaining this very, very simple. You have these atoms come together like this, and they'll be able to fuse together, and that releases more energy than what you put in. Okay, because you have a binding energy that goes into the keeping the protons and neutrons together. It's called a binding energy. So in an atom, Chris, if you were to weigh the individual protons and neutrons, right, and you would say, okay, this has like this many protons and neutrons. If you were to weigh them outside of the atom and you weigh them as in the atom, they're going to get two different numbers. It's called the mass defect. And so that mass defect is a lot of energy that's stored in this. This is why when you have a fission event on the left-hand side of the May-West curve and you split the atom apart, it releases a lot of energy in the form of thermal energy in the fission products, okay, and also in the gamma rays or X-rays, what are going to be, whatever your photons energy level is. But most of that energy is coming from the vibrations of the fission fragments that produced from the event, and that produces heat because it's transferred to some kind of moderator or something else, right? So fission and fusion are very different processes, but they both release energy. But for a fusion reaction, you need energy to be put in. So cold fusion was this idea that, maybe we can do these at lower thermal temperatures to get these atoms to bond with each other, to fuse together. But unfortunately, it doesn't seem to work because physics, for some reason, requires very high temperatures, very high energy levels, very high kinetic energies to fuse these things together. It just cannot be done at lower energies. It's to me almost like over unity devices, violations of second law. I don't think cold fusion is possible. If they ever do, I'll change my mind. But all the cold fusion ended up, when they actually looked at the numbers, just ended up being more of an exothermic reaction for chemical rather than nuclear.
I'm not suggesting cold fusion. I'm suggesting that there was enough heat to fuse them, but you can even Google this,
Well, I mean, that does happen. Have you heard of the Oklo nuclear reactor? It's a natural reactor that actually it went critical. I think 2 billion years. Was it 2 billion years ago? It's still critical. It's still critical. It's a natural deposit of uranium that had self-sufficiency because it went critical, and it still has heat that comes out of it. You ever heard of that?
Yeah.
But this
the Oklo,
Oklo, yeah,
briefly.
yeah. So I mean, we know that these things have been around for a very, very long time. But I don't think you understand the distinction between fission and fusion. They're very, very different processes of how to extract energy.
I'm trying to just basically explain how fusion will absorb more energy that it releases, whereas fission releases more energy.
No.
I mean,
if that was the case, why would they have fusion energy?
Of physics.
No, it's not. Why would we try to have fusion energy if we have to put in more into the system than what we get out? Now, there are, like, on the lower end, sure. If you're talking about lead does not like to fuse or fission because it's stable for the most part, right? So if we wanted to cause a fusion reaction with lead, we would have to put in much more energy in the system than what we get out. This is why stars, when they reach the end of their life cycle, they start fusing things that are heavy elements, one of which is going to be a lead isotope, that it can no longer fuse because it takes more energy to fuse it than what you get out of it, and the star dies. It has nothing else it can burn. It's already gone through the helium, hydrogen. It's already gone through the CNO reactions, carbon, nitrogen, oxygen cycle. There's nothing left. And so it cannot sustain itself any longer. So no, fusion doesn't work like that.
It does. The principle, though, of fusion is an absorption of energy because you have multiple elements, lighter elements that are being fused into one. And so that is an increase of energy. It's an increase in mass when you fuse elements together, and that's an absorption of energy. There has to be a containment of that energy,
but you have
which is why you have to put it so much into it, because otherwise you can't overcome the binding force. Like you're trying to say. All I'm trying to say is that a lot of heat is going to be released when these so when the Earth releases electricity, like I was saying, the crust of the Earth becomes a circuit board. Now, with all this voltage passing through it, it's causing a fusion of the elements that are in the paths of the channels of plasma that are racing through the crust of the Earth, electricity, if you will, lightning storms underground. They are fusing elements together into what are known as, this has been observed, like I said, in laboratories, super heavy elements that cannot last, probably for more than 20 seconds, most of them. So when those fuse together, when they do this in the laboratory, they call it cold packing, like in the Proton 21 laboratory in Ukraine. They show how when you fuse super heavy elements, it absorbs energy. And then because of the decay chain, when the super heavy element is decaying into the naturally occurring radioactive elements, that decay chain actually follows like an energy flow. So that energy is contained through the whole decay chain process. Obviously, excess heat is going to be released in a lot of it. So that's why you have to have more than one mechanism of heat transfer. I'm just giving you one. Just the simple process of fusion that is it's going to allow for a lot of energy to be absorbed.
But
go ahead, Snake.
I mean, when we actually perform fusion reactions, it does release heat. And just because something has like an activation energy that's high up here, that you have to get above that energy, it doesn't mean that it absorbs that energy. It can be released in the whole reaction.
And have you got into electric universe theory lately, Chris? Is that because it sounds like you're talking about electric universe?
No.
I don't
know what that is. Electric universe.
Oh, good. Yeah. Do you? By the way, just out of curiosity, you do realize the word fuse is used in different ways? When you fuse something in geology, it doesn't mean fusion, right? You do recognize that, right? When you have two rocks that can fuse together under high temperatures, that's not the same as talking about nuclear fusion. Those are completely different processes. You do get that, right?
Yeah, I'm talking more of like nucleosynthesis, because
when nucleosynthesis occurs in stars,
well, it can occur on the Earth with a lightning strike.
I think that when lightning hits the ground, it fuses things together, but not by fusion. It doesn't create fusion. It fuses, but it fuses rocks together because of high temperature. It doesn't cause fusion. It's not the same thing. You're thinking for some reason you're thinking that when lightning hits the ground, it creates fusion. No, there's a difference between fusion and fusing rocks.
That's not what I'm saying. Not like a fulgurite. So
yeah, like a fulgurite, exactly. Which I've seen. I was at a Creation Museum not too long ago, and they had a fulgurite that was like 12 feet long. It was impressive as hell.
Yeah, that's more of like a bonding of elements.
Yeah, well,
I'm talking about
it's a it's fusing together. It's crystallizing and making a glass out of the silicate, if I remember correctly, on the fulgurites. Geology is not my thing, dude. Geology is like my worst subject. I admit that.
But that's more like a compound when you have multiple elements bound together. But when you actually atomically fuse them, that's something entirely different. And that's actually what I'm talking about. But you take something like a fulgurite and you put that on steroids. You turn the entire Earth into a lightning, a circuit board with pillars that connect the crust to the mantle, lightning rods, and with enough voltage being produced, you can actually, instead of just bonding various elements, you can actually fuse them together. And the fusion process will absorb much of the heat that's being produced to make that possible.
Well, so that amount of electricity is, again, it's going to be, lightning is hotter than the surface of the sun. So you're just adding heat to the heat problem. Fusion does not absorb heat.
Yes. I'm going to have to disagree with you.
I mean,
I don't know what he means by absorbs heat. I don't know what he means by absorption there. Absorption actually is a very specific term in the nuclear field, but I mean, I have to go with snake on this one. Yeah, it's endothermic. I don't understand what you mean by fusion absorbs heat when the net process of fusion releases heat. It releases energy.
I'm not saying it doesn't release heat, but I am saying that it absorbs a lot of heat. That's all. So there's both a release and an absorption.
It absorbs energy. Heat is a very specific type of energy. Heat is defined as the thermal concentration deficit between two concentration regions where you can have a flow of energy, thermal energy between them. That's how heat is defined. It literally, you have to have different concentrations. You have to have area A, area B. One has to have a higher temperature or non-thermal equilibrium. And then heat is defined as the thermal energy that flows between them. You cannot store heat. People that say, oh, like my house retains heat, makes no sense in physics. Heat must be in motion. So it's defined to be the flow of thermal energy. So I'm not quite sure how you're using the term to say, okay, look, it's absorbing heat. No, it's you have two particles that have kinetic energy, right? Which means that they have velocity, right? They're thrown together, 1/2 mv squared, right? So they have all this energy because of the mass and their speed, their velocity, and so they're slammed together at very, very high kinetic energies. That causes them to bond together, right? And that releases this mass defects that they have, this energy that they have in the nuclei itself, and they fuse together and become stable. Yeah.
If we had these fusion products that were like storing heat, we would find these superheated molten pockets of whatever it was in the Earth's crust. If it was somehow containing this heat, the heat doesn't just go away.
You can't actually contain heat, but
that's what I'm saying.
You can't contain heat. Heat has to be moving, has to be transversing something, has to be going across some kind of medium.
Yeah, and what I'm really talking about is something like a lightning bolt. So plasma, superheated gas that's coming through the Earth. It's not like, it's both its energy and its heat. I don't know. You're a little more in depth onto that stuff than I am. But the point is, you picture a lightning bolt, okay? And it expands the air when it travels through the atmosphere, which makes a loud sound. Okay, that's the sound. I guess maybe the sound barrier being broken or something, Steve, when lightning comes through the air.
It's the air collapsing back in on itself. The sonic. Okay, when lightning heats the air and the air moves away, then all of a sudden when it comes back in, you hear that loud clap noise. That's the thunder.
Right. Yeah. So if this makes that sound like in the atmosphere, but if you can force a channel of plasma through the crust of the Earth in a very deep portion of it where there's a lot of overlaying heat and pressure, just like
what is
the air.
What is plasma?
And plasma, superheated gas, is what I'm generalizing.
No. Plasma is a very specific type of form of matter. Plasma is a type of ionized matter. There's different states of matter. There's five, possibly 6 states of matter, and plasma happens to be one of them. But it's an ionized form of gaseous matter is what plasma is. Lightning can create plasma, but plasma is just a state of matter, like solid, liquid, gas, Bose-Einstein condensate. Those are all states of matter.
Okay.
I don't know how you would have plasma underground. Plasma is an ionized gas. I don't know what plasma. I don't know what would even. I mean, maybe in small pockets, sure, but even under high temperatures, possibly. But I don't think I don't think you're having these long chains of plasma like you're somehow envisioning. That would make no sense.
The electricity, which is electron flow, would be creating plasma in the air, but
yeah.
And you can have electron flow through rock.
Yeah.
You can generally rock is not that conductive, but
sure.
Yeah, that's all I'm suggesting is that electricity flows through the rocks in the form of like little channels, okay? And then like the lightning will expand the air in the atmosphere. It does the same thing in the crust of the earth in the rock. Expands the rock, which then quickly rebounds, and that's what can produce the fusion, which in turn absorbs a lot of the energy. A lot of energy also is being released at the same time, and you have to have other mechanisms of heat transfer. So real quickly, Bremsstrahlung radiation. When
really?
Like when I guess
what's Bremsstrahlung?
It just means like sudden or breaking. It has to do with like a German word.
Yeah.
Basically, it means you take a magnetic field and you slow down a flow of electricity, and it will release radiation. It will release little protons, and
it's called it is called breaking radiation. That Bremsstrahlung is actually, I don't speak German, but Bremsstrahlung is German for breaking radiation, if I'm not mistaken. That's the etymology of the term. But when you have a particle slowing down in a charged field, a photon is going to lose energy. That's called Bremsstrahlung.
Okay.
So when you have something slowing down and so that particle has to break, it's slowing down in some kind of medium or something like that, and that releases a photon. That photon's going to carry away that energy. That's called Bremsstrahlung. It's not a proton; it's a photon. They're vastly different particles.
Well, photon. I mean, a photon has a proton, right? Or is it? It doesn't.
No, it doesn't.
I'm pretty sure that there is a single, at least a neutron within that photon.
Snake, I'm gonna become a Christian right here, right now. I think because I need Jesus.
A neutron in the photon?
I need Jesus. Please.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know where to go with this, Snake. I'm sorry.
What is a photon? Explain to me what a photon is and what exactly that would kind of reaction that would have if you introduced it into an element. Would it raise the temperature? What kind of effect does it have?
Yeah, photons raise the temperature of what they hit. But it's not. It doesn't have. Did you say there's a neutron inside of a photon?
I don't know what a photon is. I know it has something to do with light.
Yeah.
I'm not claiming to be any of this. I'm highly
to be fair.
Okay, photons are a particle that represent the electromagnetic force. Okay, so a force, they're called intermediate vector, or not intermediate vector boson, but they're a vector boson that is a force carrier for electromagnetic radiation. They don't have any rest mass. Okay, so a photon is a very specific particle that is the force carrier for electromagnetism. Like for gravity, the force carrier is a graviton, which may not exist. But for magnetics, the force carrier is called the photon. Okay, does that makes any sense? It's a force carrier particle.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not an element.
Not an element, no.
For sure.
No.
And to be fair, we don't really understand photons that well. Like,
they're fascinating.
Kind of this,
I mean, have you ever see that experiment where they shown a quantum packet of light going through a Coke bottle at super slow-mo speed, and it's I find it to be fascinating. But yeah, I think Chris, you may, before you think that you may have like solved the heat problem, you kind of might want to look into taking a basic physics course, because these are vastly different particles.
Every detail.
No, you don't need to be. No. You don't need to be an expert, but you're not even at the beginner level yet. You're not even at the intro level yet.
I just disagree with you. That's all. You can claim to be an expert and say that I'm totally out of my field, and that's fine. I don't care.
But none of us are claiming expertise here. Now, granted, I went through nuke school, so I did have to learn about physics, but I'm not an expert by any stretch of imagination. But I just have a undergrad level understanding of this stuff. But you're not even at the high school level yet.
Well, that's fine, because I'm still right, so it doesn't matter, does it?
Wow. Okay.
But you got to show you're right.
Yeah, Flaming for $2 says, "Save me, Raptor Jesus." Raptor Jesus. I'm gonna put that on my next layout, I think. Snake has a point. I mean, none of this stuff can be demonstrated.
Let me get back to the Bremsstrahlung radiation.
Sure.
Okay. A single X-ray photon, if you will, if that's how you want to describe this, is being released when the magnetic field, when these voltages of electricity are trying to push their way through the crust of the Earth, slowing down, releasing photons, X-rays, whatever, what have you. And because this interacts with the surrounding water that is present, it can actually produce deuterium, which is the second isotope of hydrogen. That fusion can absorb some of the heat. Another mechanism for heat transfer is the fountains of the deep, that are spraying out of the earth. A lot of that is just directed heat, like spraying a fire hose through a flame. A lot of it will actually make it all the way through, and a lot of it gets vaporized. But so that's another mechanism, which is directed heat just going straight into outer space.
But you can't use water to do that because. So if it's a fountain, it's obviously not frozen water; it's liquid water, but you already have enough heat to vaporize, 300% of the current oceans over like 25 times. So, even if we increase the amount of ocean by 300%, though all of those streams are going to be vaporized completely and gone from Earth, and you're still going to have more than 20 times that amount of heat left over to get rid of.
Yeah, well, this isn't all happening at one time. It's a process that, it's within the space of at least 40 days and 40 nights.
Mm-hmm.
The beginning of the flood, if you will, which is a process. It doesn't release all this energy at one time.
Yeah, my calculations are based on over a year-long steady release.
All right, so
and that's about as good as you could get, or else you might have like chunks where it's less heat at some time, but then you'd have temporary periods where it's extra heat at those times. So it's kind of the best case scenario would be an even distribution of the heat over a year-long process.
Chris, what are some types of heat transfer? You talk about the mechanisms by which heat is transferred. What are some of them? I generally only think there's three. Now, I've talked to other people, and there are of those three, there are subclasses, and some people think they're individual, and I have no qualms with that. When I took physics, it was three forms of heat transfer, but I do recognize there are other mechanisms, but I think they kind of all can be categorized in some form of the three. But if you want to say there's 4 or 5 or 6, that's fine. But can you name any of them? Do you know what they are?
Yeah, the first one is fusion, which we already talked.
No, fusion is not a type of free transfer, Chris.
I'm going to disagree with you. The second one,
okay, go ahead.
Directed heat. So that's the second one. Basically, the fountains are blasting a lot of this heat into outer space directly. And
maybe I should read for. Okay, what's the third? Sorry, go ahead. What's the third?
Man, I wish I could.
Maybe I should reform the question.
Hypercanes.
Is that hydroplate theory?
No, that's like mega giant hurricanes.
Hypercane. Hypercane.
Yeah.
I got you. Let me try to rephrase, Chris. I'll try to rephrase the question. If you were to take a first year course in thermodynamics, okay, they would teach you about things like Newton's law. They would teach you about enthalpy. They'll teach you about entropy. They'll teach you about all these different things in physics. But they would talk about very specific ways heat is actually transferred from one medium to another, right? Because again, heat has to be in motion. It's thermal energy that's from a higher concentration of energy to a lower concentration of energy. Matter of fact, the Zeroth Law of Thermodynamics states that if two bodies are at thermal equilibrium to a third, then all three of them are at thermal equilibrium. So A is B, B is a C, then A is a C, which is a transfer property. So when you're transferring this thermal energy, this heat, there are very specific terms used in physics of how that heat is transferred. Fusion is not one of them. I guarantee it. Fusion is not one of them. I mean, I'll tell you what they are, but I'm just wondering if you've ever heard of them before. Okay. For example,
no, I'm just suggesting that it is, though. I'm suggesting something that secular wisdom is not going to verify.
Well, but I don't understand how that would even work. Okay, somebody mentioned convection. Yes, convection is one of them. Convection has to do with some kind of like air moving, putting energy from one system to another system. That'd be convection. An oven has convection heat, right? It circulates the air. It transfers the air from the heating, the fire, the gas, right, to the food.
Yeah.
Okay, so you have a convection oven. The other one's conduction, right? So you have two things that are like this. They're touching each other, so you have a conduction of heat from one to the other. If you put a hot metal next to a cold metal, what happens? Heat will transfer from the higher temperature one to the lower temperature one, correct? Conduction. You touch something that's hot, it burns you. Why? Conduction. And the other ones would be what's called radiation, but there are other forms too. I mean, people have actually said evaporation is one, and yes, evaporation does transfer heat, and there's also advection and a few other ones, but it's still, I think all of them kind of fall into those three major classifications. But those are what you would learn, at least as the basics, for the conduction, convection, and radiation. Those are how heat is actually transferred in physics. I don't know how fusion would even come into play there. Sublimation is not having to do with heat transfer, though. Sublimation is, somebody had mentioned sublimation in the live chat. Sublimation is when you have a latent heat of vaporization or a latent heat of fusion, where you have a phase change from one phase to another, whether you have no temperature change, right? So if I go from ice, like water that's ice and it melts, the energy that I'm putting into the system to melt that ice isn't changing the temperature of the ice, but changing the phase state. Sublimation is when you go from one phase to directly to another phase, like for example, dry ice will sublimate and skip the liquid step. So it sublimates from solid state to a gas. That's sublimation.
Well, conduction is actually one of the mechanisms you could use, because let's say, again, the Earth is a supercontinent before the flood. Now, the temperature of that water that is under the crust will actually increase over the course of around 1,600 years or so, until the point at where it reaches supercritical stage, far above the point of boiling, and this will begin to cut channels and pores throughout the crust of the Earth, and with that, you can actually increase the surface area. So with all of the voltage, again, being released into the crust, with more surface area, more of that heat can be absorbed, like fins on an engine. You increase the surface area, and then the heat has to basically move through more of it. So it's distributing the heat. That is another mechanism. So you have fusion, which you disagree with, that's fine. But that's my primary mechanism of heat transfer, which is, it's going to be kind of hard to follow, I guess, if you automatically disagree that fusion will absorb energy. But number one is fusion. Number two is directed heat. And then number three is conduction, just simple conduction. Surface area is available to distribute this heat. And then I guess you already made, I don't know what the word you used for it was, but again, there's the hurricanes, and there's the all of the water, which is a cooling system in itself, and the frozen north and south poles. And that's actually the result of directed heat. So all the water that's sprayed into the atmosphere freezes and falls back down to the earth and covers the north and south poles. That's where a lot of that heat actually went. It's in space, it's in ice, it's in the elements themselves, the radioactive elements.
Can you run by that us again? The heat is in the ice?
Yeah, I mean, there's heat in ice. When ice melts, it releases heat.
Heat can't be stored, Chris. You cannot. It makes no sense to say heat is in anything. Heat is not stored. Heat has to be in motion.
Well, I don't know, man, because as far as I know, when you melt ice, it releases heat.
No.
Do you want to think about that for a second, Chris?
When you melt ice, when a solid block of water, H2O, becomes liquid, there is a release of heat.
Why would you get a release of heat if you're putting heat into the system to cause a phase change? They call the latent heat of vaporization, the latent heat of liquefaction. There's a lot of terms for these processes, but you're doing a phase change. You have to break down the molecular structure in order to move it from ice to a less bonded state for liquid. That requires energy put in. You don't get energy out of that.
Yeah, I mean,
you do.
just think of it.
At the same time that you put it in, you get energy out of the ice cube itself. So it's releasing energy as it falls out.
The water, the ice, is getting warmer. It's not. So that means it's absorbing heat, not releasing heat.
I don't know. We might be deterring too far off the point that I was making. I'm just suggesting that there's energy being released out into space. Okay, it's a lot of hot air, basically, and that will be trapped in super cold ice and deposited onto the north and south poles.
Well, you have to have ice that's pretty near absolute zero to absorb all that heat.
Yeah, well, they have found frozen woolly mammoths that have undigested food in their stomach, suggesting that they had to be rapidly frozen. There was something that struck this Earth. Even the Younger Dryas theory would suggest some catastrophic meteor around 10,000 years ago caused the extinction of the major mammal groups, like mastodon and woolly mammoth and whatnot. It's what froze the north and south poles. Primarily, they've been frozen before, but recently they were frozen supposedly by some kind of meteor asteroid. I don't know.
But
it's like Gray and Hancock.
Yeah, I'm familiar with those. I don't think they help any young Earth positions, but
yeah,
I think you're kind of underestimating the scale of the heat here, because you can throw a big old snowball at it, but that's just going to melt the water, and then that's going to get vaporized too. Like I said, just the friction alone is 25 from moving continents is going to vaporize 400%, or 400% of our oceans over 25 times over. So if you throw hot liquid water at that, that's not going to help much. Don't know if you can get the poles cold enough to absorb that much heat either.
I'm not sure what you're even suggesting. Are you suggesting that just the plate tectonics and a global flood would vaporize the crust?
Well, it would vaporize the water for sure.
It would superheat the water. I mean, there's a term called enthalpy, which is basically, in a nutshell, the amount of energy in the system. When you have water under pressure, as you said, Chris, right? Water under pressure can get pretty, I hate to say the word, but hot, right? So you have a lot of thermal energy in that system, right? Superheat, it becomes what's called superheated steam when it's released to a lower pressure, right? So water under pressure can get a lot of thermal energy into it, and then when you release that thermal energy, it becomes superheated steam, which will kill you very quickly. When you have all that thermal energy in the system, where you have such a high enthalpy of this water that has been under pressure, as you put it, that is suddenly released to atmospheric pressure, it will cause so much energy release that it would literally liquid. They've done the math. I mean, I didn't do the math, but I know people that are out there that have these equations. I've seen them. I haven't verified them, but I'm gonna take their face value that it would be enough energy to liquefy the crust of the Earth.
Yeah, okay.
That's part of the heat problem.
Now you're kind of getting down to the end of solving this problem. You have, I think he estimated 300 trillion hydrogen bombs in the hydroplate theory for the total energy released from the fountains, and that is enough to vaporize the Earth. So how do we remove the heat? That's why you have the mechanisms of heat transfer to reduce this. And the primary source is the one that you disagree with, which is why it's kind of hard for me to make my argument. I'm suggesting fusion of super heavy elements acted as the mechanism to basically trap all of that heat that's being released. That energy that's being released and rocking the crust of the Earth and causing it to flap like a flag in the wind, that heat has to go somewhere. Where it's going is into basically channels of plasma. It's being absorbed in fusion events, in massive, earthquake, lightning storms, if you will. And that's actually, been observed. People have reported who've seen, flashes of light literally come out of the ground after an earthquake. This happens all the time. So it's not like earthquakes can't produce electricity.
It's a completely different mechanism, though.
Yeah. You would have to show that somehow this amount of electricity can be generated by a natural source, and then that this can cause a fusion reaction, and that this fusion reaction can absorb heat, and then you'd have to calculate that it could absorb the amount of heat proposed for at least the minimum estimates of the heat problem.
Yeah, and again,
and we absorb fusion
process
releases heat instead.
Super chat real quick. Dave Dallafer, $5. Steve, buy some more gummies. I'm gonna finish these tonight. Thank you, Chris. You've given me a reason. Jesus, take me away. Go ahead. Sorry, but thank you for the super chat, Dave. Chris, do you eat edibles?
No, I don't like the edibles. I just smoke it.
Okay. I don't smoke it because I quit smoking about 6.5 years ago, and I don't want to smoke. Yeah. These are, kiddos like have some for me. These are actually hers. I have half of one. I'm done. 5 milligrams. That's it. I'm a lightweight. People mock me all they want. I don't give a crap. Seriously, 5 milligrams. I'm good. 10. Don't talk to me for 12 hours. She's like, I could take 200 of those, milligrams and it'd be fine. I'm like, I don't know how people do it, man. I don't. But anyways,
some people would say marijuana is proof of God and that He loves us.
I would think that's more LSD or shrooms or DMT maybe, but yeah, sure. Yeah. I don't know how of people, I don't know. Like I said, I think obviously my cannabinoid receptors are very open, but yeah, I don't like the feeling that much. So I just take a half one to knock out. But I probably will tonight because this is taking a lot out of me, Chris. And I'm sure Snake kind of feels the same way. And by the way, like I said, Snake and I have had our agreements or disagreements, but on this particular issue, I probably would think that Snake and I are like 100% across the board on the same page, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah. I used to smoke so much weed I could eat a whole pack of edibles and feel nothing, but I have since reduced my tolerance.
Well, I meant the heat problem, but yeah, we're on the same page with the heat problem. Yeah. Well, Chris, you kind of like maybe like wrap it up for us, because I still don't think that you've addressed in any way physics-wise how any of this would actually work. I mean, you've repeated things that other people have repeated as far as like the Walt-Brown hydroplate theory and different ad hoc explanations such as accelerated decay, which again there is no evidence for. None of this seems to work if you actually put pen and paper. If you actually did the math and you actually did the physics, none of this would work. Why is that?
I think that it would work if more research was being done. The problem is that nobody is actually funding this, so there isn't a lot of work being done on it. There's a major lack of workers, money, and resources in the creation research.
There's a reason for that, yeah. There are reasons for that.
That in itself is a problem, in trying to verify these theories that we have.
Why would that be a problem? The reason people aren't throwing money at it because there's nothing to verify. It'd be like, oh, I want to spend money on flat Earth. There's no difference here. Flat Earth has been debunked. It's been disproven many times over. Why waste money on it? I mean, do you remember the guy that spent $20,000 for a laser interferometer? That gyroscope, not an interferometer. It was a gyroscope. So a $20,000 laser gyroscope that when he used it, it actually showed the 15-degree drift that we would expect for a round Earth. He literally spent $20,000 to prove his hypothesis wrong, although he still didn't accept the findings. He's still a flat earther. But why would you spend $20,000 to prove something that we already know is the case? Nobody's interested in spending money on the creationist field because there's nothing there. It's already been many times disproven. The only reason I think that creationists, the elite creationists, right, the PhDs that write this stuff, the only reason they're trying to push this is because they believe it's salvational. They believe there's some kind of stereological approach to I guess gods, that you have to believe this or some way in order to become saved in their mind's eye. So I shouldn't say no. I believe very strongly there are PhDs that are young with creationists that know they're lying, but they do so by the ends justify the means. They'll say, look, yeah, we don't care whether the Earth is young or not. It doesn't really matter. Sure, all the evidence is just old, but we're going to try to convince the people it's young because it gets them to God, and if it gets them to God, it gets them to be saved. Now, that's not all of them. I think Sarfati, he absolutely believes this stuff. I've talked to Sarfati so many times, and I absolutely convinced he believes what he believes. Okay, I really do. But people like Nathaniel Jensen, who I've had on, people like Snellings, I think they're con artists. I think they absolutely know it's nonsense, but they decide to do it anyways because they are so ingrained in believing the religiosity of it that they have to get people to believe it one way or another. And this is the vehicle that they use in order to convince them that God exists so they can be saved. That's again, it is my personal view, and I admit that. But from talking to them directly and reading what they write, this seems to be the case, especially even from Jensen, who's even said, because he has a Harvard degree, that he's not above misleading people on these topics so long as it brings them Christ. There's a term called lying for Jesus for a reason.
And I think if AIG, with their production values and their arc encounter, I think they could probably afford to fund some research if they really cared enough.
Yeah. Why isn't Ken Ham spending some of that money on the research? Why doesn't Ken Hovind spend money on research?
The reason is because there are people that that have money. Like they have scientists that are creationists. There are many of them, hundreds of them all over the world. They publish in peer-reviewed journals, but it's not evidence for creation that they're publishing. But the fact that they can publish off-topic on creation and then turn around and send in the paper that is evidence for creation and then it gets rejected proves an obvious bias.
No, it's not bias. It's not bias.
But
go ahead.
Yeah, if you actually had an experiment that showed you could create these fusion reactions that absorb heat with electricity in the ground and synthesize heavy elements, that would be shocking to the scientific community. If you could actually show we did this with these methods,
that'd be great.
Instead of just like a philosophical argument, like maybe giant hurricanes did it, but yeah, if you actually had methods that would be reproducible, mainstream science would take a look at it.
Yeah, Dr. Shell published his paper. He went to the creationist paper, blogs, or the creationist journals first, and so Dr. Shell wrote a refutation to Humphrey's work. It's on my webpage, and he acknowledged me in the acknowledgments for that particular paper, and he had noted to me that he had gone to creationist journals. They wouldn't publish his work. He went to a philosophical journal, a theological journal that is peer-reviewed theological journal that did publish his work because he had proved it using, I shouldn't say proved it, he has demonstrated it via math. He had showed that Humphreys made a mathematical error, that anybody can go look at the math and go, yeah, he made an error, right? But the creationists work on, what is that noise? It sounds like cicada or something. Do you guys hear that? Is that on my end or yours? Uh-oh.
I didn't hear anything.
Oh God, it went away as soon as you started talking. I was this weird. Did the outside hear that? This weird noise? Is Jesus talking to me or something? But anyways, long story short, the creationists wouldn't publish his stuff. You're talking about bias. They wouldn't publish his stuff, even though it was he showed Humphreys had a mathematical error. So go read Dr. Lachelle's paper. It's out there in one of the journals. But anyways, David Delafour for $10 says, how many young Earth creationists work for ExxonMobil? Who knows? I mean, young Earth creationists still have jobs. You know, they do regular job functions, but none of them in any of the professions do they use young Earth creationist methodologies. I mean, there's a company called Zion Oil and Gas that is based out of Israel that tried to use young Earth creationism to drill for oil, to try to do it basically on God's going to tell us where to drill. They drilled like 3 or 4 dry holes. Their stock went to below $1, and they realized maybe we have to start using modeling based upon, you know, billions of years old Earth to find oil. If not, we're not going to be a company any longer. The young Earth creationist model did not work.
Yeah, but that's just one example of a creationist model not working. There are several other examples of it actually working, you know. For instance, every major branch of scientific research has been established by a creationist.
No.
Can you dispute that?
Yeah.
How?
Name one creationist that used creationism in their science to establish anything. Even the guy that invented the MRI, who was a creationist, where did he ever use young Earth creationist modeling to do that?
You don't need to use young Earth creation modeling. Like the point is that you're a creationist. You're making, you know, testable predictions.
Such as?
Well, you would need to be using the knowledge or the principles of young Earth creationism as relevant to the science. Mm-hmm. It doesn't matter what that person believes if it's not being used as a principle of the science.
All right. Well, the founder of stratigraphy was a young Earth creationist. He believed in catastrophism. He established the basis for every layer of strata.
And catastrophism has been removed from the scientific mindset because we have uniformitarianism now. So when you're going back 50 to 100 years, bias. Right? I mean, probably about 100 years ago. But that's not bias. Catastrophism doesn't work. Uniformitarianism does work, and so we science that says, oh, we're going to go with the one that actually works. So sure, science progresses, right? I mean, and so yeah, when Sir, you know, Lemaitre was a Catholic, you know, priest, right? I mean, he came up with the Big Bang model, or at least the predecessor of what we have now for Big Bang cosmology. But he was a Catholic, so what? He didn't believe the Earth was 6,000 years old, and he didn't use theology, religion, or young Earth creationism to develop the Big Bang theory. It was based upon an understanding of science, and science doesn't care whether it's young or old. It says, what does the data indicate? The data indicates old, and you even admit that it appears old. Even by all metrics of science, it appears old. But you, for some reason, don't care about any of that. You're focused on this. Oh, I want it to be young, therefore I'm going to find anything that makes it young, and you're just neglecting all the overwhelming evidence that you admit exists that makes it appear to be old.
Well, I would say that most of the methods you can use to calculate an age of the Earth will actually restrict it to less than 10,000 years old. So if most of the evidence points to a young Earth, I don't see
none of the evidence points to the young Earth.
Overwhelming consensus.
Name one shred of evidence that points to a 10,000 years old Earth.
The magnetic field.
No, it doesn't.
All right. Well, you said name one. It's giving you a headache because it's legitimate.
No, it's giving me a headache because you're just throwing out these tropes and these prats that have been long since refuted so many times over. It's just unbelievable.
No, they've actually stood the test of time. They've been so-called refuted, like there's an answer for it, but that answer is not correct.
Well, you just assume that. Okay, I'll tell you what. Show us the math involved that from your own words. Don't take it from anybody else. I want you to objectively write a paper. You don't have to publish it, but write. You know, I write my own arguments, right? Write a physics paper and show us using your mathematics how something indicates. And I don't pick whatever you want. How something indicates 10,000, and I will bring on a mathematician, physicist, or whoever, and we'll discuss it in real time. But I want it from your words, not anybody else's. From your words, because again, it has to be objective. I write my own stuff. Snake could probably write his own stuff on whatever subject he talks about. I want you to be able to write your own stuff. Would you be able to do that?
Like something brand new?
Well, no, but I mean, say, look, this is. I want to show that the radiological decay for this, blah blah blah, and here's the. I mean, do you know what like exponential decay is? Do you know what the formula for exponential decay?
I do not know the formula. I am not good at math.
Okay, well, it's P equals ERT. So it's I guess it's called PERT equation. You would have to be able to show us, right, myself and the basically the scientific community, that if you say this has been demonstrated over and over and over again, you should be able to, in your own words, show why it's been demonstrated. Because what you're doing now is you're saying, look, these people over here say this. I'm just going to go with what they say, but you haven't looked into enough to actually objectively even understand if what they're saying makes sense. Because I can tell you it doesn't.
Understand why the magnetic field decay rate makes sense. So I could explain that, but I think you already understand it. That's just one. You said to name one, so okay, there's that.
But are you familiar with there's in the ocean, there's actually these light and dark bands that occur when you have volcanic activity coming up, and the magnetic field will polarize I forget the name of the magnetic material. Somebody can remind me. Again, geology is not my thing. But it will polarize it one way. And then when the magnetic field is reversed, it polarizes the other way. So you have these alternating bands of light and dark. And we can determine the rate of this. And this goes back millions of years. I mean, right there shows that what you said is just wrong, because we can demonstrate through evidence that this cyclic ability to go from light to dark bands in the ocean, because of the reversals of the magnetic poles, has gone on for millions of years. So,
I think there's good evidence to suggest that those are not historical reversals, but rather just an effect of the magnetic field itself producing weaker and stronger levels of magnetism.
No, they're actually reversed. The north becomes the south becomes the north. We can actually see the pole shifting. Where the pole is actually over time. It's actually shifted over the last 20 years. Magnetic north has.
There is no place in the bottom of the ocean where a north-seeking compass will point south.
That's not what I said. I said that because of the magnetic field being shifted, the polarization of the material coming out of the ground has been polarized one way and then the other way. So you have these light and dark bands. And again, I don't remember the name of the material, so forgive me. But somebody wants to know if you know what an exponential even is. You know what an exponent is?
Exponent.
Yeah.
When I hear exponential, no, I could not define the term, but I think of something that's appreciable or significant, like it's a dramatic loss or gain of something. Exponential. I don't know.
An exponent is something raised to a power, right? So if I say 2 raised to the second power, it means 2 times itself. Okay. So an exponent is how many times you raise something to multiply it by itself. in a nutshell. It could be a little more complicated than that when you get into some more advanced maths, but that's basic. You can think of it as repeated multiplication, but it technically, I don't like that for various reasons, but a very simplified way to think about it is what's called repeated multiplication.
It's kind of like accelerated multiplication. Like a linear increase would be, like a line.
Yeah.
Exponential starts off slow and then it steeply curves up.
Think about it this way, Chris. If you are getting interest, compounded interest in your bank account, right? Let's say you have $10,000 in your account, and you're making a specific amount of interest. As you over time add that interest to that account, you're now getting interest upon that interest. It's just compounded rather than simple interest. Simple interest just means you get interest on that 10,000. Period. It doesn't matter if you now become 20,000 after so long a period of time. It's not that high. Let's say $10,005. You're not getting any interest on that $5. You're not getting compounded interest. So an exponential curve is basically saying that over time, as you add or remove something, it's going to increase with this curve called an exponential curve. Okay, same thing happens to decay rates. So if you have 1 kilogram of something, half a decay, what's called a half-life, means that in one period of time, half that material is going to be gone, and then the next period, half of that material is going to be gone, and then that half of that's going to be gone. So it's exponentially decays. So you start off out here, and all of a sudden, it starts decaying like this, and so you end up with nothing at the very end. It actually goes like that, but whatever. The point being, at some time you have zero. So between the initial primary amount of mass you have, and then you have nothing left, it starts decaying more and more rapidly. So it curves exponentially.
Yeah.
Even though it's half the time, but you'll see a decay. I don't know. How else would explain an exponential function other than that? P equals E raised to the ERT.
Have you ever heard like that? I don't know if it's a parable or like a real historical thing, but so like some aide of a king was like, I want 1 grain of rice for each square on the chessboard, but you double it every time. Mm-hmm. So like, you got 2, 4, 8, 16, but then it by the end square, you have like more grains of rice than are on the whole earth. It just goes, just expands. The acceleration accelerates. I guess.
Well, if you want to talk about things that are exponential, you could look at another way to calculate an age for the Earth called exponential growth rates, population growth rates.
Yes, bacteria have exponential growth rates.
Mm-hmm. Well, if you just look at humans and you suppose that humans came from Africa 100,000 years ago, 100,000 years is enough time to produce, the population size that we have today many times over.
You can't use exponential growth rates for population densities for humans because it doesn't take into account morbidity rates.
Even if you had perfect,
people dying.
Yeah, if you had perfect growth rates, eventually you'd just run out of food, and then it wouldn't grow anymore.
Well, that becomes in itself a problem, because if there's a massive reduction of the population as it tries to grow, you have a bottleneck inbreeding problem that cannot be overcome.
But it wasn't a problem on the Ark.
Yeah, you're going to have a bottlenecking. And by the way, generally speaking, human populations aren't going to have bottlenecking. You're going to have bottlenecking in certain types of other populations. I think was it the Bengal tiger or something? One of the I think feline populations had a really bad problem.
Cheetahs.
Was it cheetah with bottlenecking? But that's again, if you believe in the Ark, then bottlenecking should be the least of your concerns, because again, you're trying to get a biodiversification of 6-7 million organisms, and I'm not including like the bacteria. I'm just saying like the animal and plant kingdom. You're trying to differentiate 7-8 million types of species from a handful of initial population from the Ark. It's just not going to happen over 6,000 years. You're talking about such a massive degree of speciation rates, where you would literally have like hundreds of speciation events every generation, which is absolutely impossible. Clearly, you can't have more than one speciation event during a generation. But we have all these different species that weren't on the Ark. You have to have evolution to have them, man.
No, you don't, because you can front load the genetic information with variety. So, in that, with a variety in the gene pool, whereas today that variety is pretty, I guess, is a lot more limited than it used to be. This is all theoretical, but let's suppose
no evidence
there is a bottleneck on the arc, okay? But the way to overcome that is to front load the gene pool with variety, basically. I don't know the technical name for that. Maybe like a.
Oh, I know the technical name. There's a technical name. It's ubiquitous in science, and especially in the creation. It's called bullshit. That's the technical name. Sorry.
Created heterozygosity.
Yeah.
I think is it.
Well, there's heterozygosity.
Yeah.
Which
heterozygosity.
they've invoked massive polyploidy to explain that, which is having extra chromosomes and.
Yeah, you can have polyploidy, autoploidy, and whole genome duplication that will result in speciation events like in sympatric speciation, Chris. But these are generally not happening on like the animal level. Sympatric speciation can happen in plants. It can happen in bacteria because of polyploidy. But you're talking about very specific instances, and we don't see a lot of species out there with this happening, right? Humans don't. We can have theoretically polyploidy, but the zygotes are not viable. Every time there has been a polyploidy event with humans where I think it goes to 61 chromosome, I think, something like that. It's always been the fetus has never survived. It's always been terminated post-zygotic termination is pre-zygotic termination. So we know that humans cannot have this. Polyploidy is theory, right? We know that there have been instances of fetuses having polyploidy, but they've never came to term. But this would cause a speciation event in certain types of species. But that's not going to explain the biodiversification we have as far as what we see nowadays. I mean, it just doesn't work that way. Right, Snake? Would you agree? Yeah.
Well, I'm going to have to disagree with that one. I think that it is possible. If you can have, for instance, an original creation, okay, then you can overcome the natural problems to front loading the gene pool. If it's created perfectly, then over time it just naturally degrades and more mutations are introduced, and the variety that used to be in it is depleted. But so no magnetic field, no exponential population growth rates. Let's talk about one more, because I really wanted to see if you could dispute something else I had in mind. But since we're looking at ways to calculate an age of the Earth, you could look at the Sahara Desert. I know this is simple. I know like what you're thinking is, wow, it's this old, argument that they've been using over and over, but it really is still accurate, because it's not only the Sahara Desert, that's giving an estimate of, because in a flood, it's pretty hard to grow a desert. So it had to grow after the flood. All right. 4,500 years is about the estimated age of Sahara Desert. 4,500 years is about the estimated age of the oldest known trees that exist today.
Wait, how old?
There are some older than 5,000 years.
Yeah, the Methuselah's tree is like 10,000, but it's a colony type tree.
Yeah.
All right.
Or 11,000, something like that.
Still, restricting it to around 10,000 years old. It's so there's two of them right there, just two natural landmarks, which can show us that the Earth itself is not millions of years old. It's consistent with millions of years to have an ancient desert that is hundreds of thousands, millions of years old, or trees that can live for hundreds of thousand years. If they can't, that's kind of consistent with a young Earth model, right?
Well, we have pottery that's 30,000 years old. That automatically shows that that's incorrect. But David Dow for $5 real quick says $5 says quit while you're behind, please. But go 14,000. Somebody said
it's also
tree. I thought
all those things are also consistent with an old Earth too. Climate changes.
Yes.
So.
Yeah, I mean the evidence could be used either way. I mean, you have a tree. Okay, this tree's 14,000 years old. Well, it's close enough, to younger creationism, but that doesn't show anything because the old Earth would be the same thing too. We don't expect trees to live much longer than that. Josiah Hansen for $2 says, "What is perfect about being screwed up?" And April Van Ryan for $6 Canadian says, "Nah, I'm going to have to disagree with that." That's going to be the tagline. Nah, going to have to disagree with that. I'm going to use that, Chris. I'm stealing that from you. Although I kind of do that anyways sometimes. But I mean, but Josiah makes a good point. I mean, what would be a perfect genome? And I don't know anything about Sahara. I'm again, geology is not my thing, so I have no idea what to even tell you about just Sahara Desert. But Snake, if you're familiar with that, go for it. I don't know about that, so.
Yeah, geology, astronomy are not my stronger points, but
I know when I'm out of my depths. Geology is something I try to avoid, even though I kind of very, very basic stuff, but I'm not comfortable talking about geology. So
I want to bring something up. Have a problem with radiometric dating, mainly, not because I think like a flood happened, but basically because these dates are selected. It's like forensic science. It's not direct observation of millions of years worth of decay because of the problems of contamination are very real. That's why you're not going to carbon-14 date a dinosaur bone because if it's there's contamination.
No, that's not the reason we don't carbon date. No, Chris, that's not the reason why we don't carbon date dinosaurs. We don't carbon date dinosaurs because carbon dating is only effective to 57,000 years, give or take, up to 100 with called advanced spectrography. With AMS, without AMS, you can get to maybe 100,000 years most. But I mean, even then, it's way new technology for accelerated mass. What is it called? Is it accelerated mass spectrography? Is that what it's called for the? But anyways, effectively, it's about 57,000 years for carbon dating. You can't use it for that. It doesn't work. It's outside the range. It has nothing to do with contamination. It's outside the range of what we can test for using carbon dating. David Dallett for $5 says, "I know geology because I came from a rock." Well, rocks are atheists, right? So whatever. Just ask Aaron. But yeah, nobody suggests we use carbon dating to date dinosaurs besides creationists. No, it doesn't work for that.
I don't know why you wouldn't, because it's like you're assuming that carbon dating works if you don't know the age of the rock, but then when you do know the age of the rock, then you don't use the method, and so it's assumed not to work when you actually know the age. But when you don't, it's assumed to work. That doesn't make logical sense.
But how do you date something with carbon dating that is I mean, I kind of get. I'm trying to give a little principle of charity. I grant that you're saying, look, we automatically assume these things are older, right? But when we test them with other methods, those methods we're using this similar type of radiological systems. The way we date things is actually more what's called isochron dating, not carbon dating. So using more specific isochron dating, we can tell that the age of these bones are millions of years old. So carbon dating, which we know only has an effective range of 57,000 years, give or take, we can't use it for that because we already use the other dating methods to determine the actual age. So why would we use a method that doesn't even allow us to detect if something's older? It wouldn't be able to do it. All carbon dating at that point would tell us is it's either 57,000 years old or older. That's all it can tell us. And by the way, carbon dating still doesn't get to the 10,000 years old. It's still outside of that range. So again, why would we use a method where all it can tell us is, okay, this is greater than 57,000 years when we already have methods to determine these are 60, 70 million years old?
All right, then let's look at the isochron dates. The whole reason that the isochron method was established was to overcome the known assumptions that are involved in radiometric dating. It was a way to bypass these assumptions and just verify that if this uranium shows 2 billion years worth of decay and we find some other radioactive element within the same sample of Earth that yields the exact same age, but it has a completely different half-life, if these things are coming up at the same age, then it must be that our assumptions are correct. We do know the initial amount of the parent element, and we do know that the decay rate has been the same.
We don't need wait, but Chris, we don't need to know the initial amount on isochron dating. That's the whole point of having isochron dating. All you need to know is the ratio between the decay products of the daughters to the parents. And so, unlike carbon dating, where you have an initial amount, isochron dating doesn't care about the initial amount. It cares about the ratio of the decay products. That's, you say we came up with it to overcome whatever. No, we use isochron dating because the mathematic for what's called geochronometric equations work. If you look at the geochronometric equations, that's the term. The mathematics works. That's why we use them.
Well, and that's the problem that I have, is that it actually doesn't work. If you could test this for yourselves. You can take a sample of Earth, anything, like coal or limestone, what have you, that has some kind of radioactive element in it. Okay. Uranium's pretty abundant everywhere, so you could probably just take a chunk of Earth and send it to a laboratory, and they'd be able to find something in there and date that rock for you. But the ranges that they're going to get, if you actually do this yourself and you are actually getting the results back, you're going to get a range that falls anywhere between 100 to 400 million years. You may even get ages that are even 1 to 2 billion years. And so you have to select from one of those according to the geologic column, meaning that the entire process is forensic. And it's not directly observable. It's just selecting dates to match a certain story that they want to tell about the history of the Earth. Paleontology, you mix that with chemistry, and then you come up with, an origin of prehistoric life. But that doesn't mean that it's accurate, just because you can select them, and just because you have, it is true that you, like I talked about at the beginning, there's a relative observation. You can look at lower layers, they're billions of years old, top layers, millions of years old. But that's just relative. If you want to get an absolute age, there's no way to do that without going into basically a circumstantial case. It's a forensic.
I don't understand anything you just said. I'll let Snake try to somehow parse all that off. And by the way, we can do absolute dating. There's absolute and relative dating. Both of them work. They use in conjunction with each other. We can do absolute dating. Dave Dalla for $5. Death question. What is a kind? Do you want to try to explain what a kind is real quick? And then I want Snake to try to parse out what the hell you just said, because I have no idea.
A kind is something that can reproduce. Simple.
Oh, okay. Snake, have at it. I don't know what the hell he just said.
Well, I guess the thing that stuck in my mind was he was talking about the error range of dating, and that's usually less than 0.5% of the actual age that they're dating it to. So that's within scientific error. Like, that's still pretty accurate. If you're only off by 0.5%,
sure, that's pretty good.
Over millions of years, yeah, it's like maybe 50,000 years at the most, but over millions of years, it's still a very accurate range.
When you carbon date, when you do an isochron dating for uranium or some other elements, and you get to something where it says, oh, it's 1 billion years, your error margin is only a few million years. That's pretty insignificant in the big picture.
Well, that's actually not true, though.
Well, that is true. I mean, it's, again, you can go take these physics courses. You're saying something is not true does not show the physics to be wrong. You can show that physics is correct.
You can physically go into your backyard and break off a chunk of Earth and send it to one of these nuclear test labs, and the results that they're going to give you are going to range from 100 million to 2 billion. You literally get 4 or 5 different results using different methods that are ranging all over the place, and they have to be selected Otherwise,
Well, you have a sample that wait you're just go ahead. I can't.
If you're just picking up random dirt, the dirt that's on the surface is not going to be. The conditions are not going to necessarily be known.
you can get,
but a margin of error of 1% or less is like if I predict there's going to be 100 pounds of gold in the ground, and I go there and I find 99.5 pounds of gold. I mean, that's pretty accurate.
Yeah.
Well, that's not what happens, though. That's actually not even true. There's not a 1% error range. There's like a 90% error range. You could carbon date a living snail, and it would come up to like 30,000.
But that's
wait, dude. First of all, you cannot carbon date living organisms. Carbon dating is a destructive test. Okay, you cannot. Nothing living can be carbon dating. It's completely impossible. It's a just very destructive test. You have to actually grind it up. If I must take it to like a very fine powder, you have to make it into a very specific type of sample where you can put it in the machine to do this. You cannot. If something's living or even freshly killed, it cannot be carbon dating, especially marine life, because marine life has an issue what's called the reservoir effect, where it survives on mollusks and things of that nature that have high concentrations of carbon, because they have carbon. What is it? Calcium carbon. Calcium carbonate. So you can if you take certain organisms and you try to carbon date them, and you have to kill them to do it. It's not gonna be correct, because we understand that it doesn't work that way. We understand the ratios off between the carbon 12, carbon 13, carbon 14 dating. The isotopes ratios are off. The only reason carbon dating works is because we know there's a certain ratio between carbon 14 and carbon 12 and also carbon 13, that when an organism dies, it stops producing carbon any longer. So the carbon is all going to be toward what's going to be in the atmosphere. So you're sitting there saying that you can carbon date a living thing. No, you can't. It's not possible. That makes no sense.
And that's one of the variables that you try to eliminate to get to more accurate result. Because so every time, like you're saying, if the margin of error is 90%, every time I've seen a report of that, it's been creationists who have their methods incorrect, and they're including data that are known to contain errors already.
Do you get that, Chris? I mean, do you get what we just said?
Yeah, it all contains error, though. That's the truth of the matter. The dates that are published are pure propaganda. They're actually selected dates. It's based off of a forensic case involving paleontology. Has nothing to do with the actual chemistry. The chemistry is correct and it's accurate. You know that there's 3.5 billion years worth of decay. The assumptions that are going into that are very obvious, because the fact that if you date a layer of strata, you take a sample, fill out the chart, tell them where you found it, and all these kinds of things that you have to fill out to get something dated. And if you were to be able to get them to allow you to see all of the results that they got, you would find out that they're ranging all over the place. Not a 1% error. It's ranging millions of years. Okay, it's a 90% error in most cases.
Not on the samples that they've excluded, external contamination, biogenic intrusion. You can't just take a sample off of anywhere. You have to make sure that the sample has been more or less preserved and not contaminated by other processes. And a lot of the times when I look at the creationist reports, they're just taking samples that shouldn't be taken, that have known ways of error. And yes, there is always going to be some error. That's why there's a margin of error. But the more samples we exclude with errors, the more accurate we can get.
Well, and the technique that you would use to exclude errors would be the presupposition that the geologic column is an accurate reflection of Earth's history. You need index fossils to be able to account for any kind of errors. You can't just...
Well,
Otherwise, then you're obviously showing there's the assumptions that are involved in the radiometric dating technique itself.
I mean, none of the assumptions involve fossils. It's all involving the chemistry. Like the zircons exclude lead from are chemically phobic to lead, so they know that certain initial conditions are going to exclude certain chemicals. It has nothing to do with the fossils.
Does that kind of make sense, Chris? I mean, there's a lot of conditions that go into these types of testings. And again, even when I had Mary Schweitzer on, and she talked about the T-Rex fossil that she had, that had signs of collagen, which is a triple helix protein that we know can exist for a very long time under certain conditions, being hermetically sealed, doesn't have any kind of enzymatic functions. There's no enzyme that's destroying it, right? No colonase, and so there's a whole bunch of different things to say. Okay, look, this has nothing that's going to degrade this, and it can survive many, 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 many years. And so, the creationists came in and said, "Oh, look, this is evidence of a young Earth." And even Mary Schweitzer was like, "No, it's not. You're twisting my work in order to try to have these ad hoc explanations for your belief system." Can I at least recommend, Chris, and I've done this to you many times, and you never do, but can you at least maybe start like tabula rasa one of these days and just forget everything you think you know about this stuff, which shouldn't take you very long, no offense, but just forget everything you know about these things and start absolutely from scratch and say, look, if I wanted to determine what is the age of the Earth, or if evolution is true, or anything that relating to these topics, how would I go about doing it? What books do I have to read? And go right to the physics, go right to the science, go right to the mathematics, and start from scratch. And I guarantee it, there's just no chance in the world being an honest interlocutor that you want to go learn this stuff, that anybody would ever come to the conclusion that the Earth is 6,000 years old. There's just no possible way. It only comes to that conclusion if you have this preconceived notion that the Earth must be because of religiosity, because of some kind of religious reason. Take away the religious reason, there's no reason to believe the Earth is 6,000 years old. There's nothing in science to just show that. David Allen for $5 more says, "Screw gummies. I'm eating paste." Do you know there's a guy that actually died from that? There's actually a guy that actually died from eating library paste. I believe in the 1800s. He ate so much library paste that he actually killed himself. Don't eat paste. Paste is bad for you. But anyways, off topic. But Chris, maybe you should try that, because again, you're starting from this position that's just untenable to us, and you have to keep on throwing out all these ad hoc things based upon what you read from creationist sites, when instead you could be reading the actual science and maybe learning it.
Well, I mean, I do read up on the actual science, so
I don't think
right now I'm reading. I really do. Okay,
as you said, I have to disagree with you on that.
Yeah. Well, I'm not claiming to be smart at all, so I'm just a layman, trying to break these things down as simple as I can, and people that are
do that, yeah. And you don't have to look. I'm not saying you're not smart. I'm just saying that you haven't really looked at the sources you're looking at are not what you're going to find the answers in. These are all biased, very biased sources that have already come to their preconceived conclusion. They're saying, oh, look, we want people to continue to believe this. We're going to try to throw out anything in order to get them to continue to believe, rather than, oh, what does the actual science say? Because if you don't know the actual science, there's no way for you to even argue against it, right? I mean, you have to learn the actual science, and you have this warped understanding of what science says. And so you can't even argue against that for your own positions, because you don't know what the science actually says. Does that make sense?
My goal is to try to falsify my own way of thinking, my own models. In my experience, when I've tried to do that, it cannot be done. The Earth is less than 7,000 years old, according to any scientific research in any field.
But if that was the case, and all these scientific papers would indicate that, none of them do. So what
they are wrong.
But you're just saying they're wrong when you have no understanding of the science.
I do. I have enough of an understanding of the science and of the Word of God to tell me that the so-called scientists of today are actually, they're 90% correct in most of the stuff they teach, which is why I'm not trying to overturn the way that we try to look for coal or oil or anything like that. I mean,
So
we need to use the science that's available.
What about the Christian scientists?
Is not correct.
What about the Christian scientists? You're saying Christian scientists are wrong? The Christians out there, they're saying, look, we're Christians, but the earth is old. You're saying they're misled?
They're not Christians.
Oh, they're not Christians. Wow. Okay. I have a Christian over here that's sitting right next to me that just said, excuse me?
Yeah, you're not saved. I'm sorry. If you believe the earth is millions of years old, you're not saved.
So you think that okay, so I want to get this on record here. You think that the age of the earth is a salvational issue?
No. That's not what I mean. What I mean is if you think that the earth is millions of years old, if you claim that you are saved, you're actually lying. You're not. So it's not like you have to believe the earth is young to be saved. You just have to be saved in order to basically believe that the earth is young, if that makes any sense. So if you're saved, you're not going to go around.
So.
Okay.
So if you're saved, God will mind control you and implant that belief into your head?
No. Let me put this another way.
Please do.
You get saved, right? You believe the gospel, and then he fills you with his Holy Spirit. From that point forward, you're not going to join a Mormon church. You're not going to become an evolutionist because it's simply not possible. There's a spiritual realm when you get saved, that takes over your life, and you're not going to claim that you're not going to
mind control.
So Hugh Ross, who is one of the nicest guys I've ever met in my life. I don't happen to agree. Hang on. I don't happen to agree with him on certain specific things, but he absolutely believes what he believes. He accepts an old Earth. He's, as people know, he's on the spectrum, so he has a very different way of looking at things. But he is one of the genuine people out there. I will absolutely tell you 100%. Hugh Ross is genuine. Agree with him or disagree with him, he's extremely nice. You're saying that God is going to send him to hell because he doesn't accept a young Earth? He's not a true Christian?
Oh, no, I'm saying God's going to send him to hell because he hasn't believed that Jesus is the Son of God and that rose from the dead.
Yes, he does. He's a Christian. He writes books on that.
He doesn't believe in the young Earth because he's going to hell. It's the other way around.
He's a liar. That's what he is.
Josiah Hansen for $2 says, "How far can you see the Mount Peak? How far can you see from the peak of Mount Dunning-Kruger?" It's called the peak of stupidity. But I don't know how you can actually say that because again, I'm going to say this respectfully. If there's a God out there that's going to send somebody like Hugh Ross to hell, that is not a just God. That's not a God that I'm going to want to believe in. That God is just a piece of shit. That God, you're not converting anybody to your side by going around saying that these people that merely because they don't accept the type of version of Christianity that you do, especially when it comes to evolutionary theory, God's going to punish because that is not a just or righteous God. That is a piece of shit God. That God does not exist in my ontology, right? I'm an agnostic, right? And so you do know that I hold the position that I don't take a position whether there is one God or not. But that God that you're describing, I'm on record as saying does not exist. I denounce that type of God that you're talking about 100%. And I'm not worried about any hell because that hell does not exist. I'm on record of saying that. So you're not doing anything to help your cause to convert anybody. And don't you think you should maybe take a different approach?
Yeah, that actually pushes definitely people like me and Steve and a lot of people further away from.
My friend.
What's that?
What was that?
Your desire is to reject God. I want to help you get farther away from him.
Why?
And if your desire is to get closer, I want to try to draw you to him. So your free will is going to point you in one direction or the other.
My desire is to find truth.
Yeah.
Well,
I'd prefer if there was a God, but I don't see any evidence.
That's a whole different topic, by the way. That is a great topic, by the way, Snake. There have been great arguments out there. Nagel and a few other people have argued, should we even want God to exist? Guy Kuhn has a paper on that. Is it something that, as an ethical being, should we want a particular God to exist? That is a massive topic, believe it or not. But I don't want his God to exist. I wouldn't want the God that he's describing is not a God that I would be scared to death to have that type of being, to be that malicious, to be that evil exist, because I think that Chris worships an evil God, if that's the case.
Yeah, I think if anything, it's more likely that Satan has convinced him that he is God, something like that.
Hey, Chris, I don't mean to put you on the spot. By the way, Chris and I go way back, okay? And so I know Chris can take this. It's nothing personal to Chris. You recognize that, Chris. Let people know that, right?
Yeah,
okay.
It's just
right.
Great. This is awesome.
So this is not personal against Chris. Chris knows what he's in for. He's been on my channels many, many times. We go back very, very long time, many, many, many years. So I'm not trying to like dogpile him, okay? He knows what he's in for. He thrives on this shit. He really does. Not thrives in the topic, but he thrives on this. For some reason, he likes the attention. But Chris, do you okay? You like Ken Hovind, right? You're Hovinite, right? Correct.
I'm suspicious about that guy. I don't have all the information that I need.
Have changed. Okay. Did you watch my interviews with Cindy? Cindy Lincoln.
Interview Cindy Lincoln.
His ex-wife.
No, I don't. I didn't know you did an interview with her.
3 actually, 2 on this channel and 1 on Discord, on my other channel. So you might want to check them out because I happen to know Cindy pretty well nowadays. We talk frequently, but Ken's a duplicitous person to say the least. Again, he advocates for a God that says that the government should kill gay people, like Matt Powell advocates that the government should kill gay people. I believe that, and you accept that, right?
Yeah.
So again, I'm not trying to dog on you. But I want it on record how morally egregious I think that it is. And by the way, again, this channel has controversial shit. This channel has controversial people on there that say controversial things. I don't think all opinions are sacred any longer. I think that informed opinions are sacred, which it doesn't seem to be the case here. But just because I have somebody on that has these radicalized views does not mean that I support them. I have them on to expose to people that people do have these type of radical views and that they should be fought against vehemently. And so Chris, you're on record. You do believe that the government is righteous to come in and kill gay people and trans people, correct?
Yes, nobody can be like Batman, though, and go and do this themselves. If the government will not do it, they must be allowed to continue to live. We have to live amongst them and treat them as equals because they are in the nation that we live in. That's how it is. That's how it is.
Oh, okay, but do you understand how contradictory that sounds? I agree with you that everybody should be treated equal. Absolutely, right? But you cannot say they should be treated as equal, but under other circumstances, the government should kill them. That's not equality.
If we passed the law, it would be perfectly just. You have to use discretion, legislation.
You think people should pass that law? Just? Yeah. By the way, that's not the case, is it now? All laws are not just. So
I guess abortion is okay because it's legal.
Is that a just law, Chris?
What?
Abortion. It's legal in some states.
That's not.
Oh, so not all laws are just then?
No.
So if they passed a law to kill gay people, how is that automatically just because it's a law?
I'm not saying that just because it's a law, it's right. I'm saying that if it's a law in the nation that you live, you're going to have to learn to respect it. Like, if there's nothing you can do to change it, you have to basically submit.
There's laws that need to be changed. There are laws that should not be respected, but that's beside the point. But again, you're saying that you're absolving yourself of any kind of ethical considerations here, just of your moral values, to say, look, I'm not saying go out and kill people because of their sexual nature, who they're attracted to. You're saying the government should do it. You want to give control to the government to kill people because of who they have sex with, and you don't see that's a problem.
No.
Okay.
It's not a problem at all.
I kind of take the.
What's the? I'm gonna say, Snake. What's the word? I disagree. What is? How do you say it? I disagree with you on that.
Yeah.
A lot, like more than I can possibly put into words.
Very much. Mm-hmm. I kind of take the. If you've seen Game of Thrones, the very beginning, the man who passes a sentence must swing the sword. So I kind of feel like maybe you don't want to do it yourself.
Oh, you would do it yourself?
Look in someone's eyes and
you would kill them.
take their life.
You would kill them because they're gay if the government allowed you to.
If I was an executioner in the government, on death row, I would absolutely put them
A
in the
family
electric
member,
chair.
a friend who turned out to be gay.
Cousins, brothers, I don't care who you are.
Okay. Well, I'm gonna just go on record, and again, I even know that I get along with Chris. I think at this point, Chris, you are a sociopath, if not a psychopath. Have you been diagnosed with that? Have you gone to have mental counseling? Because I'm not being funny. That's psychotic. Paleo 101 $5 says replace gay with black and see what Chris says. Do you think
That's what the Bible says?
So the Bible
That's a God of hate.
So the government should, if they passed a law that black people should die, that'd be fine as well.
No, because that's not what the Bible teaches. That's actually not right to do.
So if the Bible said black people must die, you'd be fine with that?
So he's not
No.
racist. He's just
Good thing the
homophobic.
Bible
Okay.
doesn't say that. That's the way that I look
But
at
if
it.
it did,
I would not believe that, but that's what it said.
But you're willing to
that's why
believe
I don't believe
right?
the Bible.
But you're willing, you're willing to believe it for some reason that gay people should be put to death. But you draw the line at race. Okay, so there's
because there's scientific evidence to suggest that homos are psychopaths.
There's not.
I've never seen any such thing, man.
I'm seeing some psychopathy here.
I've seen psychopathy as well. And I'm not qualified to diagnose anybody's mental condition, and mental unwellness is a real thing. Okay. But I can definitely make a very late, my own personal understanding of psychopathy. Chris, have you ever been diagnosed as a psychopath? I mean, and seriously, it's a real thing. Have you ever gone for mental counseling on that? Because you might need to, like, legit, dude.
Okay.
You don't think so?
Yeah. No, I'm fine.
I think it's just the mind virus of religion. But yeah,
this is
like
scary.
You said,
this is frightful because I kind of knew this about Chris, but I've never had this
Yeah.
level of dialogue with him. And so this is even kind of like shocking my conscience a little bit, because even though I kind of knew this a little bit, I don't think you and I, Chris, have ever really gone to that depth in this particular thing, have we?
But you're saying
no, it's not even really safe to. You'd probably get a community strike if
No. This is all fine. This is perfectly fine on YouTube. Because I'm not condoning in this stuff. I'm pushing against it. There's nothing to have community strike. This is pointing out a very abhorrent, unethical position based upon extreme religiosity that I find to be morally reprehensible to an extreme.
But you said killing. If the Bible said kill black people, that would be a sign to you that it was written by an immoral person or deity, right?
Yeah.
So same with the Bible's
I don't
condoning of slavery and sexism and homophobia. To me, that's a sign that it was written by a morally deficient person or supernatural being, but the latter being less.
Yeah, I think that the 66 chapters of the Bible, and how many authors were in there? At least 40 people that they think penned the Bible, right? And obviously going to have different beliefs. And I'm sure one of them probably had beliefs like you did, that gay people were bad. And then King James came around, who pretty much probably was gay, if I'm not mistaken. Picked and chose what he wanted to have in the King James version. But I find it odd that you have some kind of moral consideration to say, oh, look, it's unethical to kill black people because you're not racist, but it's ethical to kill gays for the government because you're homophobic. You don't see the problem there. And I'm not saying obviously you should start being racist to be consistent. That'd be stupid. But I think that if you could apply some sense of efficacy to not be racist, that these are human beings, right? Skin color is absolutely irrelevant. Then why would you have that for any type of person who they're chosen to have sexual relationships or who they fall in love with? They're still people, just like anybody else. They just have a different thing that they're attracted to. That's it. Who gives a shit? Who cares? Nobody gives a shit what you have an interest in.
Would you execute straight psychopaths just for them being psychopaths?
No.
Okay, so then why would it matter if there's a homosexual
if there's
psychopath?
Evidence that they committed something worthy of death, I would execute them. Just being a psychopath, if you somehow became a psychopath without committing any hideous crime, I guess you're not worthy of death, but that's not really possible. You have to mature as a serial killer or something in order to become a psychopath. It's a process. Not just
there are a lot of psychopaths out there who don't commit crimes.
Well, then they're not a real psychopath. I would say they haven't reached their full potential.
No.
So Gary had asked, would you advocate stoning people to death for working on the Sabbath, like the gentleman in the Bible that picked up sticks on the Sunday and was stoned to death? Do you advocate for that?
That's no longer a offense in the New Testament.
And but gay is? That's still part of the Levitical 613 mitzvahs when it talks about that.
It's not a part of the. Okay, the Sabbath is a part of ceremonial laws, which no longer apply. The homosexual problem has to do with civil laws, which still apply.
Gary wants to know: do you know what the difference between a psychopath and a sociopath is? Do you know what they are? I mean, we throw around the terms, but they have very specific meanings.
Well, I think that a psychopath wants to kill you, and a sociopath.
No. This is why a good question from Gary, because I don't think you understand the terms. A sociopath has diminished capacity to feel empathy. Okay, a sociopath doesn't really have social skills to be able to take themselves and put themselves in other people's positions. And by the way, I know a lot of sociopaths, and most of them are high functioning. They get around the inability to really kind of get social cues by feigning a little bit. Okay, and most of them are benign. Most sociopaths generally are benign, but they lack an empathy. They don't feel the same things that we feel when they watch an animal being hurt. They don't feel what it means to be betrayed by people they thought were once friends, you know.
And just because you are fine with seeing an animal get hurt doesn't mean you want to hurt the animal either.
Yeah. A psychopath takes it one step further. A psychopath has really no conscience, no empathy. A psychopath will kill an animal just to see it suffer and get some kind of enjoyment out of it. That's a psychopath, right? Because they not only have diminished capacity to have empathy, they literally have nothing. They don't give a shit whether you're hurting or not. They feel nothing for you. It sounds like you don't feel anything for the gay person being put to death that you're advocating for because the government seems to want this. You don't feel for that person, do you?
I don't feel for that person because they don't feel for any human life.
Why?
That's just the way they are. I don't know why.
I don't know how you can make that statement. A gay person is just a straight person that happens to be attracted to the same sex. That's it. There's no difference. But even if that was the case, let's go far extreme. Let's say, Chris, you are right. They are being deceived by Satan. Does that justify what you're advocating for? If they've been deceived, wouldn't you want to help them grow? I don't think you can change gay people, and I think it's very detrimental. Even try reparative therapy does not work. But you're just saying, hey, look, Satan has convinced them, therefore they deserve to die. That's not just. That's not mercy.
No, Satan didn't convince. He obviously helped them, but that was a choice that they made to hate God, and that actually produced their homosexual feelings.
So liking men, okay, if you have a vagina, liking men, but if you have a penis, that's the same as hating God for some reason?
I don't know how genitalia have any effect on that, Chris. I don't understand that argument.
Listen, it's a symptom, okay, of hating God. You don't, I guess.
Are you listening to this?
There's lots of very.
We're gonna drink. I gotta tell you, I have literally an African American bisexual Christian over here losing her shit, and I don't blame her. She loves the show, by the way. But I'm telling you, Chris, you might want to have a word with her one of these days, because she was she's not as nice as I am. I'm being super nice right now. She's not nice when it comes to this stuff, nor should she be. I think you're making a very horrific mistake right now, Chris. Even though I'm glad you're being honest and open and all this stuff, and I respect that much of it, but I cannot respect anything that you're actually saying as being ethical. It's just not. You're condemning people for loving somebody for who they are. That's not something that a just God would ever do. Did you not see that?
A God of hatred
based on the content of their character, not because of something that they think. This is something that they do. Okay.
Yeah, I'll put her on one of the. She's going to work right now, but I mean, she's always welcome to come on my channel. She know that she's my moderator. She's also my roommate, and she's family to me. She's pretty much like the closest thing I've got to family. So I mean, it bothers me exceptionally because you're telling me that, hey, if the government had a law for this, I'm gonna lose one of my family members. I'm gonna lose something that I love and care about merely because she's bisexual and she doesn't worship the same type of God that you worship, because her Christianity is a lot more loving and a lot more respectful than what I'm hearing from you, right? If I was going to turn Christian again, it would be something along her belief system, not yours. And you're saying, well, that's not good enough. You're still going to be going to hell because you accept these things like evolution and you accept the fact that gay people are just people that are gay. So what?
It's just, Steve, the only thing stopping someone from getting saved is not believing that Jesus rose from the dead and that he's the Son of God. If you can believe that, you can get saved. If you're homo, theoretically, if you can do that, you can get saved. But I don't think any have actually done that. Okay. And if they claim to have done that, they are.
You would advocate killing them before they can live out their full life and potentially get saved.
Mm-hmm.
If they could get saved at all.
But you're not giving them the chance. You're ending their life. You're saying the government should terminate their life. So if you're 19 years of age and you're gay and you have a gay boyfriend and you're like, oh, the government's going to kill you, that person could have potentially lived to be 80, 90 years of age and maybe changed to be straight. And again, this is all hypothetically, because again, I don't buy any of this nonsense. But using his argumentation, that person could have changed later on. You've now denied him the ability to do that. You've sentenced him to hell because you didn't give him the chance to change his ways, as you would put it. And I hate making this argument because, again, it's so twisting of shit. It's just it's cringeworthy that I'm having to put forth this principle of charity argument. But what Snake's saying is exactly the way you would have to frame it. You're denying them the possibility of changing based upon your own argument. Does that make sense?
No. If you are looking at a first-time offender, for instance, of something like bestiality, what you're going to have to do is answer to God and say your last words, and then you're going to have to, regardless if you're saved or not.
I will allow a lot, but I'm not going to allow a jump from the topic of homosexuality to bestiality. That's a slippery slope. It's fallacious, and you know me, I call it fallacies. I'm not going to allow that to happen. So just walk that back a little bit, but address what Snake says. Snake, in your own words, explain to him exactly what you kind of said and what I said, because you nailed it right there, Snake, about not giving them the opportunity to change. But in your own words, and I want him to respond.
Well, you said all you need to be saved is to believe Jesus Christ rose as your savior.
Yep.
Like Steve said, 19-year-old homosexual. I was thinking even younger, a young teenager.
All right.
Comes out as gay, might have 80, 90 more years to come to accept Christ if they don't already. And you're saying, but I guess for this example, we're talking about someone who hasn't been saved yet. So you're taking away a young child's entire life to convert to Christianity just based on who they find attractive, which someone does not choose. That is just, you don't choose what turns you on. It just does.
Well, listen, even if it was some other sin like murder, okay, it would be the same thing, Even if you could still get saved in the future, you still have to die today. So you're going to have to decide today to get saved, or you're not getting saved at all. And that's what needs to be at the forefront of their mind as they're on the way.
Do you want to take away that 80 years of chance?
Yeah. I mean, you're giving them, God gave them this life to make decisions, give them free will, supposedly. And yet you're saying, look, you made this decision, which, by the way, it's not a decision, but whatever. But you're saying because of this, you've now forfeited the rest of your life. But that doesn't make any sense, because now you've prevented them from ever changing. You've condemned them to hell without giving them the opportunity. Because the next day they might go, hey, what? I'm actually straight. Okay.
And priests will save murderers.
But,
priests will go in or just lay people will go in and save murderers in prison.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
Murderers need to be put to death.
But they can't believe in Christ and not be saved?
They can, but they better do it before they get executed. Is the point.
But if you execute them, they can't change.
Well,
one problem is
they should have thought about that before they killed somebody.
One problem is you're going to have a certain error rate, right? So you're going to have some innocent people who are convicted of murder and even homosexuality under your ideal system who aren't guilty of these things. So that's why I personally do not want a death penalty. It's more expensive, and you're going to get the system's going to get it wrong sometimes. So even under your system, you should want people, the innocent people, at least you should at least not want a death penalty, so that the innocent people who are wrapped up in this could at least be saved. Or, you know, God loves all people supposedly, so that he should want as many people to get saved as possible. So there's really no point in executing anyone, because it's more expensive for the state, and you know, you'd get more salvation.
Yeah, you're doing God's work by not executing them. In your view, you're getting more souls saved because they have the look. If you have 100 people and you execute them all, none of them can change. If you have 100 people and you don't execute any of them, some percentage of them will theoretically change and be saved. Again, completely going by your point of view here again, because I just don't, I obviously think it works that way. But does that make sense, Chris? You're now restricting all those people.
That I have a better chance of saving someone on their deathbed as opposed to someone who has 20 years of life ahead of them. I'll be honest with you.
I don't think so.
Because they're desperate, or?
Yeah, they're about to die. I'm going to sweetly remind them that they're about to go to hell.
All right, so you
very sweet.
I know. What a guy, right? By the way, you're not coming to my deathbed. Okay, so please keep him away. But Chris, let's say you're at, we're going to use Snake's deathbed. I don't because, but let's say you're at Snake's deathbed, Chris, and you have another Christian who's a lot more loving and caring, and has empathy that doesn't come across as a sociopath, and he's trying to convince, or she's trying to convince, Snake to believe the specificities of their particular religion. Why would anybody choose yours over them? I mean, what advantage would there be? Because you're this person is dying, going, look, I got two decisions to make here. One person's being really unethical and pathological and psychotic, and the other one's like, Jesus loves you. You know, all you gotta do is believe him. Say, you know, hey, Jesus, I'm saved, and you're saved, and you're going to heaven. Why would anybody not chose that route?
Well, what would inspire me to worship a god of hatred?
Right.
Which, in all indication, would seem to be an evil supernatural being just masquerading as God.
Mm-hmm. I'm going to go with that.
Because it's so full of hatred.
Well, I think that that's actually the reason that you reject evidence for young Earth creation, because you hate God.
Well, that would be silly, because we are old Earth creationists that love, you know, that claim their love and profess, you know, love for Jesus and God.
About a different God, though. You're not talking about the biblical.
Well, they think
Jesus.
that they say that it is. How would Snake and I differentiate between old Earth? Like, again, I happen to have a lot of respect for Hugh Ross. I get along with him very well. Fuzzerana, same person, same thing. He's part of the reasons to believe. I get along with him exceptionally well. They believe old Earth. Why would I not, you know, go that route than yours? Even though they're looking at the same information, they've determined that the Earth is old. You're determined that the Earth is young. They're not saying you have to believe it's old to be saved. You for some reason think that you have to believe what you believe to be saved, and that's kind of narcissistic, isn't it? That's egotistical.
No. If you actually look at the gospel, the so-called gospel Hugh Ross believes, it's not that you find in the Bible. It is a false works-based salvation. So he's on his way to hell. He doesn't even have the right gospel. That's why he doesn't believe in a young Earth.
I'll let him know. I'm sure he's going to be thrilled with that.
But I thought all you needed to believe was that Jesus rose and was your savior.
Only his version of Jesus, though.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, his.
No,
I got to do it right on his version.
That is true. That you just have to believe that he rose from the dead. But just because you say that doesn't mean that that's what you believe. Some say, I believe Jesus rose from the dead, but at the same time, they believe that what they do, their righteousness, is earning their way into heaven. So they give lip service to biblical salvation because that's what the Bible clearly teaches. But when you pry them, when you investigate and you determine, you know, if they really believe that that's all that they need to do to get to heaven, you know, it's open in their doctrinal statements that they believe a works-based salvation. There's always something you have to do.
That.
Yeah, I'm not sure about that either.
But I could believe that the earth was created young and everything, but I would still reject the hateful God that you believed in. I could believe in a God that created a young Earth, but not in a God who's evil.
I absolutely I am like I said, I'm a local atheist to that type of God. That particular God that you're describing does not exist. I make that claim. I'm happy to do so, and this is why I get on atheists that are so wishy-washy. Look, there are local gods that you can say don't exist. I just don't do it globally. But that particular God you're describing doesn't seem like what I would describe to be somebody to have omnibenevolence, omnipresence, omniscience. That is not an all good God. That God is an evil God that you're talking about, Chris. And unfortunately, you don't seem to see it because if you are psychotic or have some kind of pathological issues or something like that, if you're a sociopath or psychopath, I think you're probably a psychopath. But if you have that, then you're not going to recognize it. You don't see the evil that we see because Snake and I can disagree on things, but he's not a sociopath. There's nothing I don't see any psychopathy with him. Just because we have different views on certain things, I don't think he's unethical. I think he actually wants to be ethical. I think that he actually probably has some kind of ethical framework that he has, that he goes by. I'm not seeing that with you, Chris. I don't see that you want to be ethical, so that you're not going to recognize this God that you're worshiping as being unethical. Does that make any sense to you at all, though? That you lack the ability to see the evil nature of what you're describing?
It's only evil because you think I'm condemning an innocent person. I'm not. They're not innocent, and they are not loving and kind, and they don't actually love anything. They hate children. They will hunt.
That's just false.
Wait, what?
They're a walking STD infestation.
Oh no, I'm not gonna let you go there. That's too much, man. That's too much. You're basically, you have no idea what the gay community is then. Absolutely none, because none of that is true. For some reason, and this may bring up this fact is that people that generally are against gays a lot tend to have those feelings themselves. And I mean, did you grow up having these feelings that you might be gay and then all of a sudden you fought them against them? Because this is pretty typical. What I'm hearing, the rhetoric from you, is what I hear from people that generally are gay or have homosexual proclivities themselves, but they hate themselves so much. I mean, is that possible at one time that you did have these feelings for the same sex and you don't know how to deal with them?
No, I actually recently came to this conclusion. So it's called the reprobate doctrine, to believe that certain people cannot be saved. And
I know the reprobate doctrine is, but that's Calvinism, though.
I disagreed with it just until recently, maybe last year.
But that's a tulip Calvinist approach.
It's not.
Generally speaking, Calvinists, yes. Calvinists, hyper Calvinists would say that people are predetermined to go where they're supposed to go, and that certain people are such reprobates that they're not.
That's different than a reprobate.
Well, reprobate is somebody who cannot be saved. They're salvationally isolated.
That doesn't mean that
they're not elect.
Restricted. Just because you can't be saved, that doesn't mean that you didn't have the opportunity to be saved at one point in time.
Gary wants to know, are you a member of the Westboro Baptist Church? What is your church?
I go to a church called Fireside Baptist.
Okay, so it's a fundamental Baptist type church.
Yeah,
and you're espousing views that's pretty typical of that particular congregation.
No, they do not believe what I believe, and many.
But you go to that church. Why are you going to a church that doesn't believe that you believe? Aren't they all condemned?
No, they believe the right gospel. They're just a little confused on, certain areas. I mean, you don't have to believe that somebody is a reprobate to be saved. You just have to be saved to be saved. You got to, you're not going to walk into a Mormon church or believe in evolution theory, but you could possibly question whether or not someone is a reprobate or not.
So maybe you shouldn't be having the government execute people if the Christians can't even agree on the doctrine. That's correct.
And by the way, I mean, would you consider to be part of the reprobate doctrine? Because I have not denounced God. I mean, normally one of the most unforgivable sins is considered to be blasphemy against the Holy Ghost, right? Which, by the way, actually, from what I understand from biblical stuff, I'm not a theologian, but when I understand the blasphemy of the Holy Ghost is most theological people I've talked to, let's be light, would say that a person who has perfect knowledge of God and then rejects God has committed the blasphemy against the Holy Ghost. Satan knew God existed. He committed the blasphemy against the Holy Ghost because he had perfect knowledge. It's unable for a human to have blasphemy against the Holy Ghost because none of them can have perfect knowledge. So I've never rejected God to the point to be what you would consider under the reprobate doctrine. So why would you think that gays are? Because gays don't have perfect knowledge. They've never done anything to say, look, I'm rejecting all forms of God, knowing that God exists. That's something that I would find, would be at least a little bit different argument. God say, hey, look, you know that I exist and you turn me away. That's different from saying, hey, you just didn't believe. That's completely different things. And so, like, I'm not a reprobate, am I? Under that doctrine?
I don't know.
I'm not elect either, because I don't accept either. But it's this Snake. Isn't it kind of weird that he goes to a church that doesn't espouse his views, though?
Yeah, and it's I was saying it's a little odd that he'd be so confident to have the government enforce his theology upon pain of death when
government's competent to do what they do now.
His own church community can't agree with him.
And you'd be okay if they executed you then. If they found you to be, let's say they thought you were gay, but you were mistaken, you'd be okay with them killing you, right? You'd have to be. It would be hypocritical.
If they could prove that I had, done that, then
no. Let's say you're innocent. Let's say you didn't do it, but like a witch hunt, right? I mean, Salem witches, they clearly didn't clearly didn't demonstrate that these witches were witches because they didn't exist. You're saying, though, that you're giving permission to the government to kill a person who is gay. Let's say they falsely accuse you of being gay, because people are being falsely accused all the time. Hey, welcome to my fucking world. So you would be executed as an innocent man, but you would have to, under your own belief system, accept that as just the way it is.
No, there has to be 2 or 3 witnesses of the actual event. As crazy as that sounds,
you're not understanding what I'm saying, though, Chris. All three witnesses lied.
Well, then they shouldn't be put to death if they lied. I mean,
but if the court wouldn't know that.
Yeah, the court wouldn't know that. You have 3 people like the Salem witch hunts. They're saying, hey, look, we saw Chris Chris was having sex in the foyer with some guy. We all saw it. We're going to press charges and the government's going to come in and kill you. You don't have.
Yeah, 3 guys just don't like you and say they saw you having.
Yeah, you don't think people don't lie about me? Come on, Chris, you've known me for what, 6-7 years.
There have to be witnesses. That's the whole reason I said that.
There's witnesses out there that say they've seen all kinds of shit that you know is not true about me. You've known me for a very, very long time.
Well, then you're going to have to test those witnesses and see if
they're full of shit. But that doesn't matter. The analogy is that these people have seen, they've gone and testified that you have. Look, my ex-business partner Kyle lied to the court. Lied to the court. Submitted false evidence. It happens. These 3 witnesses that we're talking about in this hypothetical situation have all lied to the court, said that you have committed a homosexual act. You're going to die, and you have in your belief system, you would have to be like, whatever. It's part of the.
No.
Maybe they saw someone who looks exactly like you do it, and they got confused.
What I'm going to do is just defend myself, and if I can't, then I don't refuse to die. Because if there's no way I can defend myself and they already have me on death row. Or you might be able to think, or you just say, oh, look, this is a stupid idea. You just might think this is nothing that we should implement. Just because there's, a possibility of corruption in the government doesn't mean that we shouldn't still legislate things and make laws. I mean, that doesn't make sense.
Well, when they're based upon immoral acts and immoral things, and I think we should preclude those types of things. But anyways, we are going to wrap it up here soon. So we're getting to the 2-hour mark. But no, go ahead. If you got stuff, go ahead. Snake.
Well, it just seems like it's based on this totally false notion that if you're gay, you're a psychopath and you hate everyone. And
right.
I don't know. Maybe we should have a discussion about moral foundations soon.
I have that on my channel all the time. I'm in fact, I think either tomorrow or this weekend I'm going to be doing maybe something on the Will Smith slap, the efficacy of that. But I have a show called Atheological A-Holes on my channel where I talk about moral theory a lot. So, I mean, go to my channel, Steve McRae on YouTube, if you're new to this channel. And I talk about moral theory an awful lot on my main channel. So I just don't know where we would go with this particular discussion, Snake, because it's so morally repugnant to me. I don't even know how to even break it down from an ethics point of view to what he's saying to even remotely have a civil conversation on it.
Yeah, I mean, I would like to talk to Chris about like where he gets these ideas from, and
Well, I'll
do
tell
you
you.
know any gay people who just hate everything? And
Yeah.
okay, I don't,
I don't
but I
really.
know plenty of gay
Got to
people.
know.
Who?
You don't actually know them. You think you do. You don't.
I don't know
Well,
what
you
you
don't
mean.
know my sexuality,
You don't know my
and
sex.
I
Well,
know that
yeah,
I
he knows.
love
He knows
things.
my sexuality, but again, I've always been. I don't give a shit about people's sexuality. They can sleep with whoever the hell they want as long as they're adults and they're
So,
consenting. That's the only kind of criteria I have.
so my gay friends, every time they show loving, to their partners or to me as their friend, or their pets, even, that's all just an elaborate ruse.
To fool you, yes, it's to convince you to
Okay.
go to hell.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, pretense. They are posers.
Do you think gay people have souls? Even they have, are they soulless or something? Or they are going to
They're psychopaths.
they're psycho they're
You have to have a
psychopaths.
soul to burn forever in hell.
Okay, so
So
they have
yeah,
so they have do they have a conscience?
no,
Okay, so their
that
souls
they do not. Yes.
okay, so they do not have a conscience. They're psychopaths merely because they are attracted to the same sex. That's your position?
No. They're attracted to the same sex. That's a symptom of an overlying cause, which is rejecting God. That actually caused them to have a seared conscience, which reacted to their hormones in some way, which basically enabled them to be attracted to anything that moves. They'll hump anything. Is what that means.
I don't do this often, but I'm going to recommend one of these days if you get a hold of Pine Creek, he would be right up his alley. Dude, have you ever been on Pine Creek's channel?
I don't know, Pine Creek.
Yeah, Pine Creek and I don't agree on a lot of things, but he's very good at interviewing people. I'll give him that. He would probably have a field day with this, I think, to say the least. But yeah, I it's hard to even address something like this, Chris, because again, I'm trying to explain to you that what you're putting out is psychopathy. What you're putting out to me is psychopathic. It's so shocked to the sentence, and you're not seeing that. You're not seeing it for the evil that it is, and you're projecting it your own morally compromised position onto gay people. I think what you're doing is projection. And I'm not saying you're projecting that you're gay, but you're projecting whatever the psychopathy you have on to gay people. But again, I don't know. I mean, I asked you if you ever had gay tendencies, and you didn't really say no. I mean, did you think
No.
that you never thought you might be gay growing up?
No.
No, you're always attracted to women.
I've heard lots of preachers talk about it as if it's like a temptation, which makes me think, oh well, if he's tempted by gay sex,
Yeah, maybe you just want to wait. You just want some dick every so often. Like I said, nobody gives a shit. You never been tempted? No. And you're married too, right, Chris?
So-
Or you were married? Are you still married?
I'm not married. No.
But you were
I
married
have
once.
a kid. No, I've never been married.
But wait, okay, wait. Do you have a kid?
Yeah.
Yeah, you have a kid. Yeah, I thought so. So you weren't married, but you had sex out of wedlock,
Mm-hmm.
and you should die for that.
Sex out of wedlock is not adultery, so no, you should not die for that.
Being gay, you should die for, but having premarital sex, you shouldn't. Okay, I just want to make sure we understand your.
well, did you pay the father the correct price and
400
everything?
shekels or whatever it is.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Right, the dowry. That's what
Dowry, yeah.
you already know.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know.
Okay.
Like I said, we're going to probably wrap this a little bit. I don't know what else we can go with this. It's been a roller coaster. It obviously migrated a lot from the heat problem. But again, welcome to the Non-Sequitur Show. That's what this show's about, which is what we do. Like, subscribe, leave comments. My main channel is in the video description. Go check out other things that we do and talk about these different things. But if you guys got some questions, ask now. Travis is a mod over Pine Creek. He can probably arrange that stuff. Tell Pine Creek he's welcome. Because like I said, Pine Creek and I disagree on a few things, but like I said, he can interview very well. I'll give him props. He definitely can cut through BS on arguments pretty well. 50 shekels of silver. There you go. But anyways, let's wrap this up on your guys' end before we take any questions if they have any. I am going to give Snake the last word. So Chris, tell us what you got to tell us, and I'm going to have Snake kind of wrap it up.
All right. Well, I think there's good evidence. You have an open mind, and you're not brainwashed by propaganda that nuclear decay has been accelerated. There's good evidence for mechanisms of heat transfer to remove that heat. And so you can explain the origin of radioactivity with a global flood using the hydroplate theory. So you can go to In the Beginning by Walt Brown, PhD in engineering. Go to Brian Nichols' YouTube channel, and he has a presentation on that. So it's got a lot of graphics. And make sure to Google the problems for the origin of Earth's radioactivity, and the first result that you get will be a published scientific paper from 2021 in April that basically describes what I was trying to explain.
All right.
So
all right, Snake.
Yeah, so I mean, we didn't hear any really methods of getting rid of the massive amount of heat. No experimental evidence of accelerated nuclear decay or ways to do nucleosynthesis in the crust of the Earth. Just kind of hypotheticals, no math, claims that fusion actually absorbs heat. So that really we barely even kind of touched on the heat problem. We talked about a lot of ways to make more heat.
Yeah. That's a good point. That's a good point, actually. I think he made the problem worse, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
But
yeah, thanks for coming on, Chris, and thanks, Steve, for having us. And
you're welcome.
Yeah,
I have to agree with you on that. I think it made the problem worse. And you know, I'm just going to leave it like this on twofold. One, you know, it's hard to say that you've rebuked something, you rebuked or refuted something when you have a non even basic understanding of the topics. If you don't know the difference between a photon and a proton, or you don't know the difference between fusion and fission, you don't know what nuclear synthesis is, you don't know what an exponent is, nobody's going to say and take you seriously when you say, look, I've refuted this. I've shown this to be wrong. Because all that you've done is just say, hey, look, this person said this. Walt Brown said this, and he's got a PhD from MIT. Yeah, he's also a religious nutter that people time and time again have shown him to be wrong. And Brown has never, ever once overcame his criticisms. Matter of fact, he's known for running from these types of discussions because he cannot in real time ever explain his theory. And when he was alive, I don't think he's still alive anymore, is he? Brown's dead, isn't he? Well, Brown, didn't he die not too long ago?
I'm not sure.
Chris, can you somebody look that up? I don't think Ralph Brown's alive any longer. But
I do know that I think the main creationist organizations do reject hydroplate theory anyway.
Answers in Genesis rejected hydroplate and rejected Brown's theory. Yes, which is pretty notable. But oh no, he's still alive. Shit. Okay, I'm sorry. Brown's still alive. My bad.
You're back.
My recommendation is go learn the physics first, and that way you can have a conversation about the physics. And you say, well, this is how the physics teaches it, but this is how the young creationist model is. And then the other thing is that when it comes to these ethical considerations, I want to make sure that in no certain terms do I support anything you've said when it comes to your positions on gay and trans and anything like that. I find personally to be so morally egregious that I'm even having a hard time talking about it because, I mean, my producer was gay. My roommate is bisexual. I absolutely find nothing wrong with it. Matter of fact, it doesn't even make sense to say right or wrong. It just is. There's nothing wrong with me being straight. So why should there be anything wrong with people being gay? Why would a God care? I mean, it makes no sense to have such a God that wants to involve himself to the degree and say, look, I'm going to create humans. I'm going to give them the capacity to have free will and love and have feelings for somebody. But if they have feelings for somebody that I don't approve of, being happens to be the same sex, I'm going to condemn them to eternal punishment. That is not in any way, shape, or form a fair God. That is not a just God. That is not a righteous God. That God is evil. That God, I believe, does not exist. And so we'll leave it up to the people out there to see what they say. But I wanted to just make it very, very clear that just because I have people on the channel doesn't mean I support them. I'm going to have controversial people on this channel. I've had them on the past. And people know I have on who I want, when I want, why I want. I don't answer to anybody. So just because I have somebody like Chris on doesn't mean I stand for that position. But we have to be able to have these discussions. And I'm going to have some controversial stuff coming up. We're going to be talking about pronouns. What can go wrong there, right? We're going to be talking about trans and sports. We're going to be talking about all kinds of controversial subjects because this channel has to be the channel that's able to have those kinds of discussions and not just shut them down. Doesn't mean we approve them. And so when people say, well, Steve's had this guest on or that guest on, so what? It doesn't mean that I support what they have to say. It just means we're going to have a discussion. And that's what the Non-Sequitur Show was supposed to be about. That's what it's about now. And so, hey, Non-Sequitur Show is back, baby. Take it or leave it. It is what it is, right? But I want to thank Snake, and I want to thank Chris. Wait, are you frozen too, Snake? No, okay.
No, I'm still here.
Okay, I wasn't sure. All right.
I'm staying very still.
Oh, yeah. But I appreciate it, guys. Like, subscribe, go watch my other channel, subscribe over there. And by the way, I'm going to look forward to these comments. And I'm sure Chris is going to check them out. And here's my thing. As long as you're not trolling, put forth your opinion, especially if it's an informed opinion. But try not to make it personal with Chris. I don't want to see, I mean, I don't care about simple invective, dumb, stupid, whatever. But if you start like really going, beyond the pales, that's not going to be permitted. So at least try to keep it, to the topic, okay? And then I'm going to look forward to reading these comments, and I'm sure that you guys will as well. Like, subscribe, and thank you very much. Have a good night.